Well, greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. It is I, the notorious RMB, sanctimoniously notorious. You know the drill. Anyway, it's a Saturday afternoon. It's a little late today. Both Tallulah and Gilbert are at the groomers. Tallulah's first grooming. She's 7 months old. She went with her big brother, and I'm curious to see what she's going to look like. But it's very exciting. I love getting our dogs groomed because they look so regal when they come back. Well, thanks for being here, members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. There's not many of you here yet, but there's going to be more, I would hope, at any rate. It's great to have you all here on this day. You Imagination Connoisseurs of the Post-Geek Singularity community. I want to say and remind you all that this chat is brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's Grooming Products. For those men who want to look good and feel great, you can go to their website at getluckytiger.com. And if you punch in PGS for this Post-Geek Singularity community, when you check out, you get 20% off. I just used their face scrub on my face before I jumped on. That's why I was a minute late, that and getting some ice water. So kudos to that. I just want to give everybody, before I start this, the end of this chat, I'm going to read all. God, I got great letters today, by the way. Great letters. If you want to send me a letter at the Burnettwork.net website, please do. There's all kinds of things. Willow Yang, I notice, is here live. She has her own page now on the Burnettwork.net. She has her own column. We're calling it a column, a page, whatever. It's called Willow Talk. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Willow Talk on the Burnettwork.net. I hope that you all check out what she writes because, you know, Willow's become my new E.F. Hutton. When E.F. Hutton talks, everybody listens. Kind of like Willow Yang. When she writes, everyone listens. But I haven't seen a review of the Immunity Syndrome. Hint, hint. Just saying. Is it coming? Because I want your take. Anyway, yeah. So let's see. What else do I have? What on the agenda? Off the bat, I have something very interesting to talk about. So my good friend Bill Hunt, who I work with, he and I started work on the Axonar project together. I've known Bill for years. I've spoken on his panels at Comic-Con over the years. He runs his website, thedigitalbits.com. If you haven't been there, it's pretty much the site to go to for any and all physical media news. And Bill is a tremendous writer in his own right. That's why I was working with him rewriting the Axonar feature-length screenplay and the Vulcan scene. He is just in the stages of he's doing a final copy edit of his first science fiction novel called Only Those Who Risk, which he will be shopping for. By the way, his novel is great. I loved it. So when you get to pick up Only Those Who Risk when it comes out, it's part of a series. It's his first novel. I'm just impressed by any of my friends who write novels, quite frankly. But when you read a novel such as his, and it's just a joy to read, for all of you, if you like The Expanse, if that's your thing, like science fiction that takes place in our solar system that's very plausible, that's what Only Those Who Risk is about. It's about the Space Guard, like the Coast Guard, but they patrol our solar system in the future. And it's really, really good. I really, really liked it. And one of the great joys, I think, in life here, living in Los Angeles, is I have many, many talented friends. And it's really great to see what my friends do, lots of cool stuff. And I'm very privileged to know a lot of really cool people. Like my fellow Cody Banks producer, Carrie David, has been on TV and she's been going to festivals with her new movie, Breaking Their Silence, Women on the Front Line of the Poaching War. And it's a documentary she directed that she spent a lot of time in Africa. She also went to Vietnam, where a lot of ivory is trafficked, and made a documentary about the women who are at the front lines trying to stop poachers from decimating the great animals in Africa and destroying animals to take their ivory. And it's just, it's an incredible documentary, and it's playing at a lot of film festivals. And if it comes and to your town locally, please go see and support Breaking Their Silence. But so Bill Hunt was telling me something very interesting the other day. They had published a review of the Captain Marvel 4K disc that just came out this week. And it was a favorable review of Captain Marvel. Now, something very interesting happened after the favorable review of the disc came out. His website, The Digital Bits, was subjected to a denial of service attack for 3 days. And that's when basically a website is flooded with incoming information to sort of, in a nutshell, gum up the works to make the website not accessible to others. Denial of service attack. There's different forms it can take, but it turns out that all of the attacks were being routed through Ukrainian and French servers, which is the MO of Russian troll farms. Now, we've all heard about this kind of thing, because interference in the 2016 election and all of that. But what I find very interesting, and look, anyone who's read any science fiction since 1984's Neuromancer, since William Gibson released Neuromancer, anyone who's released any kind of cyberpunk or read any cyberpunk, who's read Wired magazine over the or now their website over the last 25 years, which I have. I think Wired magazine is one of the great magazines about where our culture is at through the lens of technology. I mean, Wired is incredible. Anybody who's read any of these novels, or you follow tech in any way, shape, or form, you understand that what has happened with the amazing experience of the World Wide Web and the technology that we have been given by all of our tech giants, and whether it's Zuckerberg or whether it's Peter Thiel or any of the people that have been responsible for changing, Steve Jobs, changing our world, we have to take the good with the bad. And like with all technology, we've been provided with this incredible technology. And unfortunately, our ability to create new technology has far exceeded our ability to deal with the ramifications of that technology in moral and ethical ways. So basically, what's really interesting, we have a lot of different competing ideologies around the world politically. And it doesn't matter what you believe. The fact is, America is the biggest target. We have the most powerful economy. We think we're the greatest people in the world, even though there's a lot of things about our country. I love our country, I do. And I think the thing that our country should be most loved for is not the thing that we usually talk about. And I'll mention that in a minute. But what's really interesting is what people don't seem to understand. There's all this talk about, the interference in the 2016 election that helped elect Trump president. Whenever you read articles like this, and it's demonstrably true that this happened, so there's nothing, there's no how much it happened and how it all happened, all of that's up in the air. But it's true that it did happen. But what's funny to me is this idea that it stopped. It never stopped. America is in the midst, whether we care to admit it or not, in an ideological war, an asymmetric war. It won't be called that now because we don't really even understand what's happening, because since Trump's election, we really haven't done enough as a nation to both guard against what's happening or even define what's happening. But every single day across the internet, on every platform, we are being attacked. We're being attacked by foreign agents who are sowing or fomenting both dissent and discord all across the planet. And what was really funny to me about Captain Marvel is that Captain Marvel has become, as any fan knows, sort of this lightning rod litmus test within fan communities. There's a lot of people who've decided that because Brie Larson is anti-white male, or it's the social justice warrior agenda movie that Marvel made for whatever reason. Half of all of those posts, and probably more, I can't give you an exact number, a lot of this has been ginned up by these foreign bad actors, along with everything else. Any hot button issue that is divisive, whether it's abortion rights, as we've seen exploding all over the place, anything that can be exploited across social media by foreign powers and bad actors, it's been happening everywhere, all the time, every day. So no matter where you go, and this is not me being paranoid, because I don't believe in conspiracy theories because it all just comes down to money. And eventually you just find out who paid everybody else off. And because everybody eventually is for sale, because we have a finite amount of time to live on this planet, you got to get while the getting's good. You want to make tons of money while you're young enough to really enjoy it. So there's a very small window that allows human lives to be corrupted absolutely. And the only thing that we have to corrupt each other is large quantities of money. And why does that do so? Because money allows you to indulge in all of the great pleasures that we as corporeal beings enjoy. You can wear the finest threads, you can live in the finest houses, you can travel to the finest places, you can drink the finest whiskey, you can meet the finest members of whatever sex you enjoy meeting. All of those things are open to you when you have lots of money. So it's not like I used to wonder. I used to read like I read a lot of horror fiction, like horror novels. And when you'd read horror novels about some like Cthulhu-like demon, or even when you're talking about a satanic character, maybe like in Rosemary's Baby, how Satan comes up and has his way with Mia Farrow and she births the son of Satan. I always liked the lead ups to those ideas. But then at the end, it's like, okay, so if Armageddon happens, the apocalypse happens, reasonably like in the book of Revelation, well, then what? Like, is the devil gonna like fix plumbing? What's he gonna do with private education? Or are we gonna have charter schools? Like, what's gonna happen once the ultimate evil takes over the earth? Like, then what? So it never really, these kinds of horror novels would get me. I love horror novels up until like the last 4/5. You get to that last fifth, and then it's all like, okay, how do we either defeat the evil or the evil takes over the world? They never really have great endings. So, but what's really interesting is, how do you take apart the United States? Now, first of all, we have been deeply divided across every ideological spectrum that whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter whether it's political, whether it's let's argue about pro-choice and pro-life. Let's argue about vaccination versus anti-vaccination. Let's tell people that don't believe in science anymore, and let's tell people that are gullible that, oh my God, vaccination causes autism. All of these things. The earth is flat. All you have to do is sit back, if you're wanting to take apart America piece by piece, and just throw out a bunch of articles that you don't even, on both sides, just to foment that anger and that dissent. And it was really interesting to me that Captain Marvel and somebody coming out and writing something pro about Captain Marvel, something nice, was then going to be exploited by Russian hackers, and demonstrably so. And it was strange to me, because even that was something I never thought about. Now, I've read, of course, articles about how our people's hatred and disappointment in Game of Thrones. That's just something that I'm sure that the hackers are like, boy, they give us a TV show they're arguing about. Let's do what we can to supercharge their dissent and their acrimony, and that's all they have to do. It's not even, they can just paraphrase, they can rewrite other people's articles. I mean, and it's crazy to me that, so Captain Marvel, in the context of a positive home video review of physical media, that that a denial of service attack on a website that for the last 20 years has just brought you great information about the latest releases on home entertainment, whether it was DVDs, Blu-rays, and now 4K. And you have a man like Bill Hunt, who runs the site, who's been passionate about this. He even once wrote a book, I believe, with Todd Dugan, about home entertainment, and that even his website is not immune to people that can use the fact that Captain Marvel has become a really a hot button issue, and all you have to do is spread out. You can just, I can only imagine. I kind of want to go and work in if there was no language barrier, I'd love to go work in one of these farms, just because it would be really fun to come up with nonsense that you could just spew across the internet and nobody would know. But on the other hand, it really makes me sad that we've created this incredible technology with which to share our lives across the planet instantaneously. And now, in addition to, don't get me wrong, I love the fact if you want to use the internet, there's so much information out there. There's so much you can use it for, just like me talking to you right now. That's incredible. It's incredible that we have this. But that Captain Marvel, a review of Captain Marvel, caused a denial of service attack against a website that talks about home entertainment. I mean, that's just one of and that, by the way, from a trolling standpoint, it's pretty brilliant. I just think it's even I can start to tell, like, there are people that troll me online, especially on Twitter, and then you go find out, like, who is this person? And you see they have like one follower, or they're following like two people. And sometimes I've actually engaged with trolls just to see, but those accounts aren't real. Whether I used to call them Russian hot bots. Like 4 years ago, I was always talking about in Collider Heroes, because you knew they were coming from Russia, and there's a lot of I was married to a Ukrainian woman, so I was like, oh, these Russian hot bots, they're always coming after me, and people thought that was very funny. I don't even talk about Russian hot bots anymore, because now everybody knows that they're real, and it's all happening, and we are doing nothing. One of the most telling things is that nobody sees this really. I mean, there are a lot of people that take it seriously, but we in the public aren't really, because it isn't. All you have to do is turn off your computer, and then all that all that trolling, all the angry screaming and yelling we all have, all the vitriol goes by the wayside. Turn off your computer and you go offline, it's not even there. But we need our dopamine fix. I certainly do. I mean, what would I do if I couldn't talk to you guys online? But I just thought it was interesting that even Captain Marvel or Star Trek Discovery or any of these things are being used. We are being exploited so easily. We're just being played so easily. And while there's lots of people who know, and what's really interesting, and here's what I find the most interesting, is all of this dissent is causing our own tech giants are now responding to it, and they are becoming more fascistic on our own, within our own borders. These tech companies are being pushed into being fascistic and being they're censoring people now for speech that they don't deem worthy. You've got people, I mean, we are being pushed, we're being played, and it's on one hand, it's kind of funny to watch, but on the other hand, it's monumentally depressing because you can see it happening and we're not doing anything about it. Certainly as a nation, we're not defending against it. We're not smart enough to rise up and go, hey, man, there's not this much hate online. I mean, really, do we hate things that much? But it's interesting to see our community, the Post-Geek Singularity community, is very susceptible to this kind of Mickey Mouse nonsense. And I would implore you, like we're always talking about on the John Campea show, when you read articles, always look at the source. Always do yourselves a favor. If you read something or you see something that really gets you incensed and angry, look at the source. Try and track down, whether you're going to Snopes.com or wherever, I don't care. Just begin your own journey and follow the rabbit hole to see where it goes. Because don't get played. Don't fall into these traps. And it's interesting because I've seen our whole community. I get letters every day. As a matter of fact, I'm going to get to these letters right now. I get a lot of letters from people that praise the fact that I'm trying to be inclusive and I try and be nice to people. Well, I'm not trying to be. I think genuinely I am that kind of a person. I like people. I like all kinds of people, and all of the potpourri of human beings on this planet, for the most part, I think are pretty great. And it's strange to me, even in our anger and all of the things that we get pissed off about online, and you see all these, whether it's activists on either side screaming, yelling, and I find it all, the word I use is bemused. I find the modern age bemusing. And I find and that's how I try and use it. I don't get mad. I just get bemused. And you kind of got to filter that out and really take a step back and go. I used to think too, there's another thing about my life that I like to think about. And when something happens that to you, that's I put it into two categories. Is it a problem or is it an inconvenience? Problem, terminal cancer. That's a problem. You need to get eyeglasses, inconvenience. And if you really break it down that way, I've always thought that most of life is just a series of one inconvenience after the other, followed by the biggest problem of all, death. And everything is on a scale between the two in my mind. And for the most part, being a lifelong geek and living in the era we live in, things are pretty good. I mean, if you're an imagination connoisseur and a geek, life is pretty grand. We're bitching about Star Wars movies, but there's one coming out in 6 months, and there's a Star Wars television series. So that's pretty good. There's a 4th season of Veronica Mars coming from Hulu that I'm just deliriously excited about. Who would have ever thought? After, of course, a crowd-funded Veronica Mars movie. 20 years ago, this never would have happened. Veronica Mars would have been gone after 3 seasons, and that would have been the end of it. But we live in a world where, oh my God, there's more Veronica Mars. I hope it's really good. A lot of my friends were in it, especially my friend David Starzyk. So I think that's pretty great that we're getting those things. But, we just have to be mindful, and ever vigilant that we are under constant attack from people that don't like the fact that the United States exists. Even with all of our wacky, crazy problems that, our infant mortality rate's one of the highest in the civilized Western world. The fact that we don't have healthcare. I mean, we're universal healthcare. We do live in a crazy country. That education, why isn't education and healthcare at the top of our national defense programs? I don't know. Wouldn't the first thing for a strong national defense be that we have a very healthy and very educated population? I would think that would be our baseline. Oh, but it's not, because all of that deals with profit. Well, that's just me. Anyway, let's see what someone has to say before I read the first letter. And these are good letters today, people. I guarantee you. Dave Atkins, are you a Park Chan Wook fan? Thoughts on Stoker? I liked Stoker a lot, actually. For those of you who haven't seen Stoker, Park Chan Wook, Park Chan Wook is an interesting filmmaker. He is Korean, and Stoker is. I thought when I was going to see it that I can't pronounce her name. It's Mia Wachowska. I can never pronounce that word. I don't know her last name. But we've also got Matthew Good, who played Ozymandias in Watchmen, and of course Nicole Kidman. And what's really interesting about Stoker is it's written by what's that dude's name? Hang on. Yes, Wentworth Miller from Prison Break. He wrote it, which is crazy. But I really like the movie. It's sort of an offbeat story about, the less you know about it, the better, but you should watch it. But Park Chan Wook is a really interesting filmmaker. Stoker's kind of Hitchcockian, but here, let me tell you a little bit about Park Chan Wook, because he's worth following. So when I was married, my ex-wife designed covers for home video, and one of the there's a thing that came out called 3 Extremes, and it came out from Lionsgate, and it's a trilogy of horror films that Fruit Chan, Takashi Miike, and Park Chan Wook did, and he did a segment called Cut. And if you haven't seen 3 Extremes, seek it out, if only for the episode Dumplings. But Park Chan Wook, you guys might know him mostly from the Vengeance trilogy. Old Boy, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, and Lady Vengeance, which, by the way, are available on Blu-ray. He's a very extreme filmmaker. There's a lot of bad human behavior, and he doesn't shy away from those things. But his last film that I dearly, dearly love, and it is absolutely gorgeous. And if you guys just want to see a great historical mystery, The Handmaiden. But all of his movies are worth seeing. And yeah, so I guess he made Stoker before he made The Handmaiden. And then he worked on the Little Drummer Girl TV series, which is actually pretty good. So really interesting director. So I would definitely check him out. So now I'm going to read my first letter, and this is a good one. This one comes from Jim Boyette. Hey, Rob, really enjoy your show and your defense of Kathleen Kennedy. It's bizarre to me that people would react with such vitriol to her work. Like you say, even if the movies are bad, it's not like she set out to make them that way. Even weirder is the idea that there is some correct way that they should have been made, that everyone would agree on. I didn't care for The Last Jedi, but the only part I did like was seeing Skywalker's jaded disillusionment and regrets. I hated The Force Awakens. I'd rather watch the Ewok Adventure and Ewoks Battle for Endor back to back. To me, Star Wars is a franchise with special problems for anyone wanting to expand it. The original trilogy is a fairy tale and a story of the hero's journey. It has this mythical quality that is very hard to maintain over the long term. For example, Snow White has to end with happily ever after. If we follow Snow White and Prince Charming 20 years in the future and see that they've both gotten fat and are screaming at each other over who gets to control the remote, it's no longer a fairy tale. Back in the 90s, when I read the Timothy Zahn trilogy, I already had the sense that even though those books were great, the more we knew about the Star Wars universe, the more that all-important mythical quality degenerated. It's not like the Star Trek universe, which can sustain all sorts of stories of varying degrees of verisimilitude. I felt that most strongly in watching Rogue One. I don't think the Star Wars universe can sustain a story about realistic political intrigue. The moment things starts getting realistic, I start asking questions about the underlying premises of the universe that never bothered me in the original trilogy. In the 1977 Star Wars, the Death Star is a powerful symbol of the destructiveness of the Empire. But in Rogue One, since we're watching what purports to be a realistic portrayal of political intrigue, espionage, and the accompanying moral quandaries, I start asking questions appropriate to such a story. Like, for example, why would the Empire go to the trouble of building a Death Star just to destroy a planet? Can't they just drop hydrogen bombs on it? I mean, we here on Earth have the capacity to totally destroy a planet too. Big deal. In retrospect, something else that made Star Wars so magical back in the 80s was scarcity. There were only 3 movies. After that, the comics and less than a dozen novels, including the film novelizations, and the Ewok TV movies. But we all know those really didn't count. Even the Christmas special used to be shrouded in mystery. Because it was so hard to find, at least growing up in Arkansas, I finally bought a bootleg VHS tape in Tokyo in 2001 for like $100. I guess I'm a sucker for anything with B. Arthur. The Star Wars universe was so tantalizing precisely because the original trilogy did a good job of seeding the stories with tangential mysteries, such as what the Clone Wars were all about, what the history was between Han and Lando, exactly how Luke and Leia had been separated at birth, etc. Because these mysteries were tangential to the main plot lines, the movies didn't need to resolve them, and they sparked your imagination enough to pull you through multiple viewings. Even if you had every frame of the movie memorized, there was so much you didn't know that had happened off-screen that the movie only hinted at. I imagine it would be hard to maintain this sense of vast mystery if the franchise is putting out a film or two a year. Anyway, thanks for listening to my rambling thoughts. Excelsior, J. Boyette. Well, Jim, I totally agree with you. One of that was always the funny thing. He fought in the Clone Wars, and that bounty hunter we ran into on Order Mantell changed my mind. All of that stuff. You're absolutely right. I mean, it was all of that world building that was going on just in the background with somebody making an offhanded comment. And you're like, what? And what's interesting is that all of those offhanded comments are the first things people glom onto when they want to tell further Star Wars stories. what I found really interesting is that I've never understood why, to inspire Star Wars or Star Trek or any of our great franchises, that people don't now do what George Lucas did. George Lucas went back and he was like, oh, I want to, the Jedi are basically samurai knights, and I'm going to look at movies like Hidden Fortress or Kurosawa's other samurai films and for inspiration. And for the space battles, I'm going to go back to World War II, and I'm going to cut in footage famously of the Dam Busters to show what these battles will eventually look like. But now everything, and Star Trek to a certain extent has become this way too. Like, no one is looking outside the Star Wars or the Star Trek franchise. Like, if you look at Balance of Terror, one of the best episodes of the original Star Trek in the first season that Willow wrote such an eloquent review of, when you watch that, it's clearly a submarine. It was inspired by submarine warfare and submarine movies. I mean, clearly, it literally is a shameless ripoff, but set in a science fiction context with social commentary at the same time. But when I see modern Star Trek, like Discovery, not to just rip on Discovery again, but it just came into my mind. And if I have an opportunity to rip on horrible writing, wherever I see it, it's always a good opportunity. The latter half of Star Trek Discovery Season 2 was a mishmash of half-baked science fiction ideas that have been around since the dawn of time. Ooh, an evil AI that wants to get rid of humanity. And time travel in a weird suit. None of that made sense at all. And yet, because you have writers that understand the superficial nature of these things, but have no real understanding of the larger ramifications. One of the great things about, I think, reading novels, especially science fiction novels, is the extrapolation that occurs. When you have a great world building, somebody sits down and says, okay, if this is true, then there is a million different things that make it true. And one of the things that George R.R. Martin would do in Game of Thrones in his novels is he'd come up with something very simple, but then work that idea backwards to where we got to, how it got to the present. When I was a kid, when I was in junior high school, I was shown a program which still to this day is one of my favorite programs that I've ever seen. And there's a British historian named James Burke. James Burke. And he had a show called Connections. And what was so great about Connections is James Burke would start it, and he had this very affable voice. And look, anybody who had a British accent, I would listen to and immediately was smarter than I was. If it was a, more of an upscale, not like Cockney rhyming slang or something like that, but the Oxford kind of. I mean, that's why I believe that all of the imperial officers, like Peter Cushing, of course, he was evil because he was diabolically smart because he was British. I just thought that was the way of the world. So when you'd watch Connections, it would start out like 2,000 years ago, and they would talk about how the ancient Romans created aqueducts, or they were able to get water into people's homes. And it would start with that invention, and it would go through time, and you would see how one thing led to another, led to another, led to another across literally centuries, if not millennia. And then it would end with a nuclear bomb, and you never knew. And as a kid, I would eat this up. And I first saw this, they were showing this to us. There was a teacher I had named Mr. Wall. And we had, it was like a gifted child program called ELP, the Extended Learning Program. Now they probably wouldn't have that in school for fear of offending the kids that weren't part of that program. Like, God forbid any children who are exceptional can be catered to, because everybody's equal now, right? But anyway, so I would watch this and I would be fascinated. Not only was I fascinated from a story standpoint, because it was like a historical mystery. Like, where's it going to wind up? You always wanted to know, like, where was it going to go? It had something inherently built into it, which was the conclusion. Like, where was James Burke going to take you on this journey? And then they did I think a Connections 2 series years later, but I've frankly never sat down and watched it. But that always sort of struck me. And the Star Wars franchise and the Star Trek franchise, one of, I think, the appeals, especially of Star Trek, was the answers of they didn't even bring up these questions. We as fans would bring up these questions and sort of run them down. And one of the great joys of being a Star Trek fan, like if you're reading Star Trek novels, is that the best Star Trek novelists would be like, okay, if this situation exists here, how did this situation happen? And the best Star Trek novelists, and I include people like Diane Duane, like the Reeve Stevens, Judy Gar, like Christopher Bennett, like Dayton Ward, like David Mack. I mean, people that really understand the Star Trek universe are also they really put the screws down to develop a backstory, and it's a lot of fun. And I think that's one of the great appeals of these franchises. And with Star Trek and Star Wars, it gets a little, I guess, annoying to the fan base when the things that are presented aren't things that track with what have come before. To me, and I include that in my word verisimilitude, which is one of my favorite words. So yeah, anyway, I've kind of lost my train of thought on that, but I don't even know where I was going with all that, to be honest. But thank you for your letter, Jim. This next letter comes from Christopher Garland. This is a good one, sort of. Christopher Garland says, "Hello, Rob. I'm writing in response to your Robservations live chat number 130. In it, you made several points that I had some disagreement with, and I'd like the opportunity to respond to them." By the way, I love letters like this. I love when people respond to things that I've said. I mean, that's one of the things I love about this channel, is having open dialogue. And especially this letter, Chris disagrees with me a lot, but he presents his thoughts in a very cogent, respectful manner, which I think should be par for the course. You Imagination Connoisseurs, you are members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. This, my friends, is how it's done. Christopher Garland says, "Hello, Rob. I'm writing in response to your Observations live chat 130. In it, you made several points that I had some disagreement with, and I'd like the opportunity to respond to them. Quote, I don't get why people don't like girls or women in things. I just don't get it." That's something I said. "That's a straw man," says Christopher. "No one is making the argument, and you know it. It's just a way for creatives to dodge criticism. Surely by now you are savvy to this." Well, Christopher, I would say that isn't true entirely. I think there's a lot of men, especially men in the genre space, and I've seen it my whole life, that they don't like strong women. As a matter of fact, they can't even talk to women in real life. So seeing women in front and center in movies is uncomfortable for them, and they don't like it because in their real lives, in the real world, they have problems talking to women. And in the genre space, anybody who's been spending the last 40 years, like I have, going to science fiction conventions, that has been a readily apparent truism in my life. Now, I can only speak for myself, but I would say that I have seen that to be true on, let's say, more than one or more than 100 occasions. So I do think you can't tell me that no one is not making that argument. There are a lot of people, and I've seen it in my own life. As a matter of fact, they're the same as the true. There's women that for various reasons also have problems with men, and I understand that. So you can't say that I'm not savvy to it. I have seen in our space, anybody who's followed fandom for the last 10 years has watched this. I mean, it's happening. From what happened to Anita Sarkeesian when she starts criticizing tropes in video games, I mean, to now, it happens. And there is a deep element of misogyny in fan circles, and there always has been. So now, is that a bad thing? I think yes. But I think it's just a function of the fact that we're not all well socialized people. And a lot of the people that, why do people, both men and women, why are you attracted to genre material? Genre material are flights of fancy, that whether it's science fiction, fantasy, horror, comic books, video games, whatever, they fuel our imaginations. And if our own lives are not carrying us to foreign lands or alien planets where I can meet a green alien space babe, which is something I've always wanted to actually have happen in my life, I watch Star Trek, and then I can see Green Orion slave women. Oh, wait, I can't. Green Orion animal women, that's what they're called now in the toys. It's all a function of that. And if it, anyway, let me go on. But I feel like I should, because you're quoting me and then and saying something, but I do respect you for the way you have presented these ideas. I guess I wrote, I don't know if you're actually quoting me directly or paraphrasing, but you say that I said fandom was defined by old, out of shape dudes. Again, I'm not saying that there aren't certain creators that are paragons of physical fitness, because I've met those people. But again, a lifetime of going to science fiction conventions, literary conventions, comic book conventions, media conventions. Yes, I think that people are drawn to writing about the fantastic because the fantastic is the way they would like to believe the universe is. And that's why they're drawn to it in the first place. I know that I want to be living in a world where I can go to alien planets and meet alien people and travel through time and live on the Enterprise and fight dragons and all of those things. But I can't. I have to live my life day to day with, pending lawsuits and having to pay rent and listening to people lie about me repeatedly online. That's my reality. But you know what? When I can binge watch season 3 of Designated Survivor because some friends told me to watch it, I can get involved with idealistic people that I believe live and work in Washington, D.C., just like they did in the West Wing. But so fandom was defined by old, out-of-shape dudes. It was. It has been for a long time. I mean, look at the archetypes of the characters in all of genre fiction. He says, you also go on to say, yeah, because until a certain point, they were the only ones showing. Here's what he says. Yeah, because until a certain point, they were the only ones showing up. Why shouldn't they define it? Okay, you're correct about that. They should define it. For a long time, old, out-of-shape dudes were showing up. And you say, yeah, because until a certain point, they were the only ones showing up. Why shouldn't they define it? Well, that was true. But now all different kinds of people are showing up. Girls are showing up. Transgender people are showing up. Gay people are showing up. Religious people are showing up. Whole families are showing up. So what happens is the definition needs to change. The problem that I have is when, as you put it, the old out-of-shape dudes or the young out-of-shape dudes that only believe their fandom should be one way get angry when all kinds of different people enter the arena and want to play. Then everybody gets angry. And that's when I have the problem, because those people are just as welcome. And that's the way it should be. Then he says, I said, because no one wanted to buy sci-fi from female authors. Wrong, dude. That's just what the publishers believed. It wasn't actually true. There were plenty of female authors that were wildly successful at the time. That is true. There were. But writers like James Tiptree Jr. was a woman, and she changed her name so she could get more easily published. Science fiction for the longest time was pretty much a dudes only place to be. Did we have people like Ursula K. Le Guin? Did we have people like Margaret Atwood coming in? Octavia Butler? Yeah, we did. And traditional science fiction has been exploded by people. Charlie Jane Anders, one of my favorite writers. She's new to the scene and is writing some incredible fiction. But look at the Sad and Rabid Puppies experience at the Hugos. We have a lot of people that want the status quo to remain the way it is. And the problem is, I always thought that being liberal and progressive meant we're just open to new ideas. But now I see that some of those things mean, or all of those things mean, you're only open to your ideas. And I think that that's the problem. So when you say that that's just what publishers believe, no, because that's all what dudes were buying. As you say on the point you're making just up above this one, fandom was defined by old out-of-shape dudes. Yeah, because until a certain point, they were the only ones showing up. And then you say, wrong, dude, that's just what the publishers believed. You can't have both be true. The publishers believed it because the only people showing up were old, out-of-shape white dudes. And that's changed. And I've watched it change over the last 25 years. And that's amazing. And you know what it means? It means we're just going to be getting better stories and more interesting points of view. And that's what science fiction is all about. You don't ever want science fiction to be a moribund genre that's only giving you one point of view about one thing the way you want it. I mean, the funny thing is, the thing that I have about Star Wars fandom is that while I have problems from a story standpoint, and I grew up loving Star Wars, but the people that are angry about it seem to me, for the most part, angry because they expected Star Wars to be one thing, one specific thing. Now, if you want to talk about the larger problems with Star Wars storytelling, I'm with you 100%. But when you think that Star Wars has to be defined one particular way, it has to fit in one box, I don't think that's necessarily the best thing, which brings me to your next point. that I said, do you think anyone wants to make a bad Star Wars movie? Your answer is yes. And his name is Rian Johnson. He has famously said that it is his intention to make a polarizing movie that some people love and some people hate. Okay. Well, there's nothing wrong with making a polarizing movie that some people love or some people hate, but that doesn't mean it's a bad movie or it's a bad Star Wars movie. Wouldn't you rather be provocative? I would rather tell a story that somebody has a response to, good or bad, than a movie that just sits there and people go, eh. I mean, Rian Johnson was the same way that Unforgiven was a complete deconstruction and demytholization of the Western genre. That's what made it great. And when you look at Luke, the last place we would have expected him to be is a sort of an embittered old Jedi throwing his lightsaber over his shoulder. But that to me was interesting. I was like, that's cool, because I don't necessarily have a problem. I don't necessarily need Luke Skywalker to be a Jedi Knight 30 years after the last time we saw him on the movie screen. People change. That's the world. That's why I thought it was interesting. But it's no one's intention to make a bad movie. You know, the only people that say that are people that have never made movies. Everybody's trying to make the best movie they can. Movies are too long and too hard to make. And this idea that anyone ever set out to make a bad movie is wrong. It's wrong. And then I said, you say that I said, and we have Game of Thrones because of them. And then you say, but the ending was horrible and ruins the entire thing. I can't bring myself to watch the old episodes anymore because I know what it leads to, and I'm not the only one who feels that way. I will say this to you, sir. I agree 100%. I agree 100%. I think that whether you like the 8th season of Game of Thrones or not, I think you could write papers and it will be written about that the final season of Game of Thrones, I don't believe ended the stories that were being told. And I'm not just talking about the character of Daenerys or Jaime Lannister or Tyrion or whomever, whatever your Jon Snow, whatever your favorite character was. It's not just the character endings, it's the entire story. What was the point of the entire story? It was so beautifully intricate and interwoven, and there were so many points being made. And I think that the 8th season of Game of Thrones let down the entire essence of what Game of Thrones had been. I agree with you. I think that the ending of Game of Thrones was a huge letdown from an overall storytelling standpoint. I will agree with you there, 100%. But there are joys to be had in the 8th season as well. I love the first 2 episodes. I thought the first 2 episodes were great. Anyway, then I said, the mundanes are the ones that are supporting and keeping our franchises alive, not the fans. I think this was from a letter you were reading, but you did agree with it. There's a rule in business, he goes on to say, this is what he's saying. There's a rule in business from the most loyal 20% of the customer base, in this case, the fans. It's the fans, not the mundanes, who see the movies over and over again. It's the fans, not the mundanes, who buy the vast majority of merch. It's the fans, not the mundanes, who generate free publicity for the IP. This statement is just plain wrong, and it's truly unfortunate that most creatives probably believe this. Look, this channel is dedicated to the Post-Geek Singularity. Everyone is a fan of this material. Their fandom, people love. Endgame did not gross $2.5 billion because just the fans went. The Marvel Cinematic Universe appeals to so many different kinds of people. Casual fans, diehard fans, comic book readers, non-comic book readers. And the idea of what a fan is, there's now, fans were over here and the rest of the people were over here. Now it's everybody's a fan, but it's now a spectrum of fandom. And we can't expect, some people are at the extreme end of fandom, other people are casual fans. Before, real fanatics made up a small fraction of the population, but in the post-geek singularity world, everybody's kind of a fan. It's just a question of how much of a fan that they are. And now you finally, and when you say, it's interesting because then you make these statements and then you go on and you say, this statement is just plain wrong. My statement is that the mundanes are the ones supporting and keeping the franchises alive. And you end by saying that this statement that I made is just plain wrong. And it's truly unfortunate that most creatives probably believe this. No, that's what our businesses tell us. It's demonstrably provable. that the fanatics are not the people that are keeping these franchises alive. You need to get everybody to show up. Movies are very expensive. When you're making movies and television, you have to break free of the fan base. And it's interesting because certainly our diehard fans are important. I'm not saying they're not. They are. I've been a diehard Star Trek and Star Wars fan almost since their inception. But I'm going to show up anyway. I hate Star Trek Discovery. And every time I watched the episode, I wanted their episodes to be better. But by the end of the episodes and then by the end of the seasons, both of them, I felt a supreme sense of betrayal. But they're not trying to appeal to me. It's just they appealed to, in trying to appeal to a much broader fan base, they really appealed to nobody at all. There are people that like it, and I don't begrudge them. But you know what? I haven't heard anybody talk about their fervent, passionate love of Star Trek based on only Star Trek Discovery. Maybe there are those people. I'm sure I'll hear from them. I'd be curious to read a nice letter explaining to me why Star Trek Discovery means something to you that come nearly as close to as one of Willow Yang's letters do to prove why the original series is still relevant 50 plus years later. So I have to disagree with you there. Now you finally end with, also in the video, you never made any meaningful attempt to define what you thought toxic fandom was. Again, this is a loaded and divisive term commonly used by creatives to dodge criticism, and only serves to demonize fans that refuse to just shut up and take what they are given. Okay. Here's the thing, that what is toxic fandom to me is when a bunch of fans get together with one another and they're going to share their enthusiasm for, say, Star Wars. If one fan then starts telling another fan that they're wrong, starts screaming and yelling at them, making them feel bad because they don't agree with what this other fan believes. When fans are being mean and vitriolic and dismissive of other fans that have a baseline of love in the same fandom, there's a problem. There's a big problem. That's how I would define toxic fandom. Toxic fandom is when our group of fans is being mean to each other for opposing points of view. And when I say mean, I mean really, really mean. And you know, when I was growing up and going to conventions as a kid, I met lots of people, especially at more literary-minded conventions. There were talk about insufferable twats that I would meet at these conventions. I mean, people that were such dicks about their beliefs, and they had their noses so high in the air. But you know what? I never heard somebody. They would be insufferable, yes, but they would listen to you. And when they would tell you you're an idiot, they would do so in a more of an erudite way. And you could have these discussions, and you wouldn't be anonymous and just say, well, fuck you. You know, it wasn't like that. People were at those conventions. They understood that there was a baseline. I went to Norwestcon, which is mostly a literary convention, to meet other people. In fact, I went to meet those people because I learned from them. You know, and I think that was important. It was important to have that. Toxic fandom now has come to the point where when we're hating, when fellow Star Trek and Star Wars fans, or MCU fans, or Harry Potter fans, or video game fans, or whatever, are going after each other on social media and tearing each other down because of how they perceive a video game or a movie or a television show to be, that's toxic. That's toxic. People are getting swatted. You know, it's crazy the way we're dealing with people now. And what's even worse, look, there's a lot of things I hated growing up, and I've been very critical over the years of people's movies. I'll give you an example. One of my favorite directors growing up was John Carpenter. When I saw Escape from LA, I hated it. Hated it. Now, I was happy it got made, but I felt bad for how much I hated the movie because I loved John Carpenter so much. Now, people are just more than happy to tell John Carpenter, fuck you. I mean, that's the difference. That's what's happened, is people will go after John Carpenter and blame him and hate him and tell him this, whatever they're going to tell him, even if they love John Carpenter, you know, and that's toxic. I felt bad because if a movie came out from a creator that I loved and I didn't like what it was, I was the one feeling bad. I wasn't trying to make them feel bad. And I think that's a huge difference. Now he ends, Christopher ends with, in the words of our overlord and savior, Dictor von Doomcock, without respect, we must reject. Well, Christopher, I would say that is a great lesson. And I like Dictor von Doomcock. But you know what? Without respect, we must reject should apply to fandom as a whole, not just to our franchises that we love. We should apply that to each other. Anyway, just what I'm thinking. Just what I think is problematic. But, you know, I did like this letter. And I want to say, Christopher, that I like that you called me on these things, and I like that you make me define what I think toxic fandom is. In my mind, this is exactly the kind of letter that I want to get here. If you want to be, I thought you were respectful. I thought you had good questions. I thought you're making me define what I meant. And I think that's cool. I think that's exactly what should be going on here. And I welcome you to send me a letter and participate in this, the Post-Geek Singularity community, and come back anytime. Keep writing letters, keep watching, and I appreciate very much hearing from you. So thank you for that. And maybe I should have just read your letter all the way through first. Perhaps not. Let's see. Mark C is here. Mark C says, I believe the closer to myth Star Wars stays, the better. Imagine the current trilogy using the myth of siblings Sigmund and Signy, Sigmund's son Sigurd, and the magic sword as a foundation for a story. I would say that's Norse myth. Is that the Ring of the Nibelung? I'm not up on this. I don't know exactly what it is, but I agree with the concept. I can infer your meaning based on your question, and I think you're absolutely right. I think the problem is, you know, because we're fans, we want to know everything. And when somebody makes reference to the Clone Wars, it's like, ooh, what's that? You know, I remember reading before Empire Strikes Back came out, there was lots of magazines that would get published with lots of like fan speculation in them. And I remember reading once, and this is something I've never forgotten, that Obi-Wan, they said, was a clone designation. It wasn't Obi, it was O, the letter O, B1. And they just said Obi-Wan. And that was a clone number designations, and that's what we would learn in about the Clone Wars. And it was funny. I was like, at the time, you know, I'm like 11 or 12. I'm like, yeah, man, that sounds exactly right. That's exactly what it is. It's a clone designation, because it's all we knew. Because nobody knew what the Clone Wars. What does that even mean? I mean, and frankly, I don't think that there's anybody that ultimately wasn't disappointed by what the Clone Wars meant. I honestly didn't think, I thought the Clone Wars would have had a little bit more depth to them. Like, the reason the war started was because cloning was going on, kind of like genetic Supermen were being made, that the idea of cloning, the idea that you could make a second set, you could take someone's genes and duplicate them and there'd be clones running around, is what started a war. And maybe people were being duplicated or something like that. That's what I thought as a kid. And when I finally saw what the Clone Wars was and all about, I'm like, so the Clone Wars are about, they made clones that are fighting. So they're just literally called the Clone Wars because it was the clones that were the soldiers doing the fighting. There wasn't really a war over cloning technology and the ramifications of that, which I always thought is, well, disappointing when we finally found out the gun the Clone Wars has. Well, it's not really it's clones are fighting the war, but why are you calling it the Clone Wars when you're fighting against separatists? And anyway, just a thought. Loquacious Primate is here. Loquacious Primate says, I think Mead discussed a computer science researcher who studied alleged Russian bots on The Last Jedi via algorithm, but was unable to validate much. That could very well be. But you know what? It's obvious to me, apparent just in my own dealings on the internet, seeing these kinds of things go down. And why not? We've built this amazing tool that can be used for the most incredible asymmetric ideological warfare ever. You know, even we used to fly planes over areas that we drop leaflets down into North Vietnam to the farmers to hope to change the hearts and minds of the North Vietnamese. You know, we don't have that anymore. You've just got the internet. All you have to do is target whatever to people, and they will buy into it. It's the greatest ideological delivery system. Look, all of these, anybody who was looking for a friend, anybody who's stewing alone in their anger, hey man, you can go online and you can find people of all shapes, sizes, colors, creeds, whoever you want to meet, whatever you're angry about, you can go find your own echo chamber on a daily basis and jump into it. This is a case in point. I'm not saying that this is an echo chamber, but really it's hopefully this is an echo chamber of what I'd like to think is positivity. Now, there's a lot of, as everyone knows, there's a lot more and fan circles where you can go and not get positivity. And you can go find them right now. As a matter of fact, I enjoy watching those because I like hearing people's points of view. And I like, why do you feel this way? And I try to, understand. Because I am gearing up to doing another movie. And after Tango Shalom is finished, there's projects that I want to make. And by surfing the internet, web surfing, you find out what people want, what people like, what people are looking for, and how can you address these issues. It's interesting. Willow Yang sent me a chat. Willow Yang said, sorry, I didn't send any super chats this week. YouTube wouldn't accept my Canadian credit card. First impression of Boston, so many Dunkin' Donuts. That's your 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a 4-word review of cities. Maybe we can, now that we have 3-word reviews of movies, maybe we can have Willow Yang's 4-word review of cities. Listen, I want to say something about super chats to everybody who's listening. Very much appreciate the channel being supported. It helps me out. I don't know if I could do it, frankly, 7 days a week without getting the channel supported. And we're able to build the website because of it. We're able to do other things that are going to become more apparent to you. So supporting the channel is great, and I appreciate it. But I don't want anyone to think that they're unwelcome here because they don't send me super chats. I know a lot of people, for whatever reason, can't. And what's more important is that you guys are here and that you're participating and that you're having a good time, most of all, and that you get something out of it. I mean, sure. Do I want your money? Yes, I would. I'd like to get the channel supported, but this channel wouldn't be anything. It wouldn't be worth coming to if the people that are here weren't here. It's you guys that make this channel worth anything. I don't even know if it is worth anything. You guys have to tell me. And as long as this place is a place to come where we can share ideas and talk about what we love, then it's a good channel. If not, then I can't expect anybody to support it. But as long as you guys are having fun and you feel that my work here is worth supporting, I very much appreciate it. But you don't have to. It's very much appreciated, but I'd rather have you here participating than not. Willow Yang sent me another super chat, which I thank you for. She says, French postdoc ordering a mocha at Dunkin' Donuts. Cashier, do you want milk in that? Postdoc, what? There's no milk in your mocha? Cashier, it's coffee and syrup. Postdoc faints. That's very funny. Koba is here. Koba says, funny, given how the founder of science fiction was a woman, Mary Shelley. That's probably to a certain amount true, the idea of the postmodern Prometheus. But you know what? I think it even goes back even further to science fiction, depending on how it's defined, might go back even further. But I guess from a literary standpoint, that might be definitely one of the first science fiction books, Frankenstein and all that. So you might be right. That's why I find it very, very interesting. I mean, growing up, I was always reading science fiction by women. I've never understood. I just don't understand. I guess it's because I've liked women my whole life. So I would never want to live in a world without them. So, you know what? To me, as a matter of fact, why The Last Man? It would very much appeal to me to be the last man on Earth, to be honest. It would be kind of fun. Mark C says, as the genre culture diversifies, we aren't getting better stories. We're getting stories and marketing relying on a character's stereotype instead of their character. Well, Mark, I don't disagree with you there, but I don't think that's entirely true. There's still amazing stories to be had all over the place. You just have to look for them. What was really interesting is I think what you're describing, getting stories and marketing relying on a character stereotype, is what the sad and rabid puppies were after. They were after sort of not a holistic approach to people, and the stories that were being told, they wanted more traditional, say, space opera, and I thought it was kind of bummed me out. It's not something I would want, but I think you're right. I mean, the problem is now, all of these things have to be marketed and sold to people. Look at the publishing industry. I mean, my God, when I was growing up, all the wacky science fiction and horror paperbacks that would come out, you get crazy stuff. Even Star Trek novels were crazy. Look at Ishmael. Here Come the Brides meets Star Trek. That would never get published today. It's amazing it got published. Della Van Heist's Killing Time. That would never get published today. But nowadays, everything has to be marketed because it's all about money. And things are a lot more expensive to get out there. But so it's so strange to me that we've got more ways to market and get to people than ever before. But I think you're right, and I think that's a factor of the fact that it comes down to how is our culture. Our culture is we're not pushing the boundaries of our own culture. We're sort of we've put ourselves in these boxes, and I've said we're navel gazing. We're looking down. We're not looking up. We're not looking out. I mean, I'm disappointed to see more televised science fiction isn't dealing with things like transhumanism and what is it going to be when human beings, this is stuff that's been in literary sci-fi, but when you can live to be, I think about Dan Simmons' books, Olympus and Ilium, which I dearly loved, but the idea of humanity in those, one of my favorite books that I keep talking about, Peter Watt's Blind Sight, which was nominated for a Hugo in 2006. That's got some pretty heady concepts in it. But I do think that we're all sort of being crushed into these boxes of non-innovation because of marketing. And I don't disagree with you at all. Mark C says, I find most older fans are okay with anyone that comes to play in the genre sandbox, just don't break the toys. Yeah, but you know what? Anybody who knows, like myself, when your toys break, you have to do things that are innovative with them. Like, kit bash. If you broke an Enterprise model, you could kit bash it and you could turn it into a destroyer. So if one of your nacelles broke off at the halfway point, you turn it into a destroyer, or you turn it into a transport tug from the Franz Joseph manual. I was always doing that with my toys. But, I do think that people have a limited view of these things. And what I find sort of tiresome is that I'll tell you something, a pet peeve of mine that I don't like. What I don't like is, say, when they gender swap a character and then they don't make that character's gender part of the new characterization of the character. It's just a female version of what we already got with the male version of that character. That's why I loved, say, the first season of Jessica Jones so much. The first season of Jessica Jones was all about trauma, and it was all about something that I don't think you could have told that story with a male character. I think that it was a great, in that way, it would just be different. But that's why I thought Jessica Jones was one of the finest. The first season, I was a little disappointed by the second season, looking forward to the third season, which I haven't seen. I think it dropped already, or just dropped this week. And I thought that was great. Jessica Jones gave us a look at something that had never been depicted that way before. And I thought it was great. And that's what made it so amazing. Doshi says, I just picked up Captain Marvel and Toy Story 1 and 2. They didn't have part 3. My Best Buy sucks. Lack of Blu-rays is a dying format. Look, all physical media is a dying format, but I'm going to hang on to it. Isn't it great to get a steelbook of Captain Marvel? I think it is. But you're right, Doshi. Doshi says, I've been told that if I like The Last Jedi, I should die. Yeah, that's that is my friend. That right there, Christopher, that is the definition of toxic fandom. Telling somebody if they like something, they should die. Really? Really? Dale M sent me in a super chat, and he looks like his avatar is from Heroes, which is kind of cool. Anyway, let's see. I got more letters. This is another one that comes in from James M. James M says, "Hi, Rob. I love your show and how you have shown respect towards everyone, which is sadly starting to become more and more rare. I feel the same way towards your show as I do Star Trek. That is, every episode, if I agree or not with the opinions given, I always find each episode very interesting and thought-provoking, proving the old saying, you learn something new every day, is still very much correct. I would like to respond to the letter Chris wrote the other day about Song of the South. I managed to watch it about 5-ish years ago. If my memory is correct, as a movie, I don't think it was that good. However, the moral is great. The moral being to trust others. Johnny learned to trust Uncle Remus. The grandmother learned to trust Uncle Remus. While I understand why Disney will probably never release it in any form, it is a great example of why we, as individuals of the Post-Geek Singularity, should never give up our physical media. Because when we own it, no one can take it off a website and stop us from enjoying it. P.S. Could you give us a little insight into what all the moderators do for the channel and website so that we can appreciate them even more? Well, yes, I can. I got to say that I think that I have the best damn moderating staff, dare I say it, on the internet, and I mean all over the world. First of all, I got Terry, who's a crazy man from the UK that I love. I got Greg Smith, one of the kindest, gentlest souls I've ever known, who isn't past building a 1-to-1 scale snow speeder or a land speeder or an Imperial probe droid in his garage, or, you know, fixing his Boba Fett van until I mean, the guy's amazing. And then I've got Detective Jim, who is a retired police detective who used to be, you know, driving in a black and white. And then I got Mike Bodden, who is sort of check this out. Mike Bodden, one of the moderators in this chat room, Mike Bodden, the Honorable Mike Bodden, is actually the mayor of Riverdale, Iowa. So we've got a police detective, we've got a fan who rebuilds houses, we've got a mayor, and then we've got Terry, who I'd like to believe Terry is the Lord Byron of all of the UK right now. That's kind of how I imagine him to be. Those are 4 gentlemen that, I mean, we could do a movie about them. We could do it like a team heist movie, and you could have Detective Jim would plan it because he's got his law enforcement background. Greg Smith would build everything. Mike Bodden would be the logistics man who would plan it all and implement it. And then Terry would be the front person who would actually be like the Clive Owen character in Inside Man, if you ever saw that movie. So I think that really the moderators here are making up what could be, I mean, we could write a movie about them, honestly. But you ask what they do. Well, to be honest, I don't quite know. I just think that they work magic. Mike, of course, presides over the website, which I think is great. He's constantly innovating it, changing things around, adding things. And both Jim and Terry from opposite sides of the pond come in. And I think they were just at first. I met Jim because he wrote me some letters and contacted me before he was even moderating. And Greg, I've known I met him, I think, in junior high school, maybe not junior high school, not elementary school. Because I went to Island Park, but I don't think Greg went to Island Park. So I met him on Mercer Island in the 7th grade. And so, you know, they what they do, basically their job is to make this, the Post-Geek Singularity community, palatable for everybody, that everybody can feel welcome, and that when monumental douchebaggery occurs, they jump on it and stop it from happening. Because I don't like monumental douchebaggery unless it's on screen. And then it's good. Then I like monumental douchebaggery. But thank you for that. I appreciate that, Mr. M, for being here and asking that question and sending me a letter. This next one comes from Orlando Logan Olivero. He says, salutations and howdy from the scorched realm of Texuween. That's Texas and Tatooine. This is my first letter, and I hope it is not the last. I'm an occasional listener and semi-occasional chat participant. I have been enjoying the show thus far. Recently, an individual from Long Beach, I believe, that would be Paul, commented about Kathleen Kennedy's involvement with the Star Wars franchise. He was attempting to make the point that Kennedy ought not to be blamed and criticized so harshly because there have been other examples of canon and non-canon releases that would be considered to be unforgivably shitty. I believe that was the point he was trying to make, and I apologize if I'm mistaken. He then cited examples like Caravan of Courage, the Holiday Special, etc. I can halfway agree with that notion. However, those examples are more along the lines of supplemental and promotional snacks. I don't think many fans consider them to be canonical, nor are they taken seriously. Oh, come on, dude. Ewok's Caravan of Courage, totally canon. They are small potato projects. On the other hand, Kathleen Kennedy is in charge of the freaking Thanksgiving dinner. It's a turkey that people were definitely starving for. But here's the thing. Everyone's expectations differ, and we can't please everyone, can we? Some people like giblets in their stuffing. I personally don't. Some people like cranberry sauce. Well, I only like it from the can because I know what I'm going to get, and I'll just take a little bit on top of my stuffing. Again, no giblets, please. To further illuminate this, I will use my personal experience as a dude who used to really like Star Wars. Yes, I realize it does not represent the fandom as a whole. Throughout the late 80s and mid-90s, I was still invested in the Star Wars franchise, like a boy still obsessing over his first girlfriend. I collected Star Wars Marvel comics, model kits, and copied VHS tapes of droids that I had dubbed from the TV, ordered shirts through catalogs. Suncoast Video had these catalogs, and started reading the books that would later be considered the expanded universe. So my first instance of grave disappointment arrived with the prequel trilogy. I had waited nearly 20 years for this and had nearly 20 years of expectations. I had created an entire scenario and story in my head. I had imagined what these characters would look like, how old they were, what the plot would be, and envisioned an aesthetic similar to the original trilogy. Well, I was about 95% wrong with everything. Some examples? I pictured Anakin a lot older to reflect his look and age at the end of Return of the Jedi. Also, I didn't think that Jedis would all look like LARPers dressed like Uncle Owen and old Ben Kenobi. But some people liked it and managed to create a new audience. I kind of just checked out at that point. I'll pick up some $20 Star Wars Black Series toy or some stupid mug every now and again. It's like my mom, who no longer goes to church, but still buys a little Jesus mug, ornament, or $20 Black Series toy, or whatever. I think Kathleen and company tried to replicate the idea of creating a new audience and appeasing the original fandom, not realizing that the fandom is expansive, diverse, split, and a bit too passionate at times. There are folks like me that like the old stuff up to Shadows of the Empire. Others like the old stuff in the prequels, but not the new stuff. Then there might be some folks that like everything that gets churned out. Side note, I dated this gal to whom I shared similar tastes with. Well, so I thought. She liked Star Trek The Next Generation and would go to conventions. I was instantly excited. Then she said that she wasn't a big fan of the original series, complained about the sets. This put me on double red alert. I'm willing to accept that none of us are right about this. They know this, but they're trying to give us everything we want. There are particular ideas, biases, and agendas that are being pushed, perhaps, if it is profitable. One can argue that if it's all a make-believe pretend story, like the Bible, he says, we can pretend the things we don't like about it just don't exist. It's hard, but we have the ability to do just that and move on. I have to do that all the time with regard to the Transformers franchise that can't seem to be cohesive after Beast Wars. So in that regard, I would agree with Long Beach Guy. Star Wars has had inferior product before, but I would argue that we would benefit from better cooks in the kitchen. I don't think the franchise belongs to us anymore, and maybe we need to let it go and venture elsewhere. Besides, they just want our money more than our loyalty. I'll tell you what. If Kathleen stops putting turds in that old turkey, I may sit down to eat. Hugs and kisses, Orlando Logan Olivero of Pteranodon Media. And that's Terranodon. Pteranodon Media. Well, let me tell you, Orlando, I don't disagree with you. I felt the same way about Return of the Jedi, because in my mind, I thought it was going to be a much bigger, more expansive story. I really thought Return of the Jedi would have the scope of, say, Return of the King. That's what I was expecting, and it certainly didn't. When I first saw an unfinished Death Star at the beginning of Return of the Jedi, I was like, wait, what? Why would you build a second Death Star if the first Death Star got taken out? Clearly, it wasn't a bad idea. It wasn't a good idea. That Imperial brain trust immediately, and then it wasn't expansive at all. So anyway, I know how you feel. But I agree with you. I think that I talk about this a lot, that certain pop culture is really of the time that it was made. I think one of the things that's really wrong with modern Star Trek is that the idealism that was created in modern Star Trek it's not lost upon me, a white man like Gene Roddenberry, post World War II, a man who was a police officer, who was a speechwriter, who was a World War II combat pilot and later a commercial pilot. That man came with a certain vision of what the future would look like. And Star Trek is based on that vision, which was informed by the optimism that John F. Kennedy brought when he took the White House in the early 60s. And that's why we landed on the moon, because of that optimism. We don't live in that world anymore. And yet Star Trek at its core is based on that particular vision of the future. But what's happening is they're trying to change and move away from that and make the Star Trek future more inclusive. And what's interesting is they're torpedoing the whole enterprise. Star Trek is a period piece. It's just a future period piece that hasn't happened yet, or actually never will happen. And you need to treat it as such. I mean, it was interesting. I'm not saying that they need to go in. I think, look, Star Trek: The Next Generation did a pretty good job extending that universe forward. It's interesting because Gene Roddenberry had learned something. He was still a little stunted, I think, in his ultimate development about what humanity would become, because that's what happens when you get older. I mean, it's a function of getting older. What I don't see is modern Star Trek has not been a great extrapolation of the franchise. They're trying to, rather than take Star Trek and bring Star Trek into the future, they've tried to turn Star Trek into something else. And I think that's wrong. And I think with Star Wars, they should sort of skew more toward those classic myths than anything else. And they keep trying, but now the interests that own Star Trek are Star Trek. I'm getting all muddled. The people that own Disney is interested in making money. They've got their shareholders. They bought Star Wars for the specific purpose of making tons of money. Nothing else, just tons of money. That's why they bought Star Wars. The biggest, best entertainment franchise that's ever been created so far as its marketability to people and its survival across multi generations of fans. And that's why they bought it, period, to make money. They did. And anybody who says, no, they bought it they bought it to make money. And they have been succeeding at that. And they'll continue to succeed. And I hope that they make good Star Wars too. Let's see. Mark C says, oh, hang on. Now Alexander Wilson's here. Hello, Alexander. How are you? Alexander Wilson says, toxic fandom are the Game of Thrones fans that accuse Benioff of infidelity with female actresses because that's the only reason they get screen time. I'm glad I divorced myself from that crap. Yeah, I mean, that's silly. But again, that's the world that we live in. That's where people go. I mean, it's funny. What I find really interesting as a person that actually makes entertainment, I know how hard it is to make entertainment. I've noticed that there's channels, guys like Film Gob, who for a long time took content that I was actually on, the Collider content, and they repurposed it. There's been a lot of, over the years, making fun of Collider, the network that I was on. And I think the best parodies that I've seen come from Red Letter Media. My two favorite genre humorists or genre channels are the Auralnauts, AURALNAUTS, the Auralnauts, and Red Letter Media. I adore them both. And while I have been personally, this channel hasn't been ridiculed yet, although I'm sure it's coming. I don't mind that kind of ridicule because it's flattering that somebody would feel the need to do it. But for the most part, when I've watched videos that have made fun of me or people that I know, there's truth in it. It's just that what isn't really understood is if you're a fan and you have YouTube channels around the world and you're not living in LA and you're not covering the actual entertainment business, the channels that are, people are getting paid to do that. Like, I'm not getting paid by another entity on this channel. It's just me. I have no agenda other than my own and the members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. But I think that toxic fandom, all this weird backbiting, and it's strange to me. I don't mind getting ridiculed and made fun of. That's fine. I mean, you put yourself out into the public space, you should expect to get ridiculed and made fun of. You know, especially like, can you imagine if you, I don't know, you made $1.5 million in a crowdfunding campaign, and for whatever reason you couldn't deliver to people what you were supposed to deliver, and instead of taking responsibility, you just blame a bunch of other people? Can you imagine being someone like that? But that's the world we live in today. Anyway, Mark C says, after the second letter today, I really wish you'd hunt down the second letter I sent Tuesday. I will do that. Maybe I can do that now. Benjamin 23 says, how do I morally process the fact that I spend more on entertainment than helping the poor or donating to worthy causes? I am far from rich. Benjamin, there's an easy answer for that. You are leading your only life. And when you're dead, you can no longer have any fun and have any kind of entertaining time on this planet. And while I think that it's always important to help your fellow man and to be somebody that is mindful and polite and realizes there are other human beings on this planet, there's nothing you can do about them. You know, if you start thinking that way, you're like, man, you know how many people live in India? You know how polluted the Ganges River is? I really want to do something about it. That's great. And I think that we shouldn't ever fight that impulse. But you know what? You're the only one leading your life. And why shouldn't it be great? Why shouldn't you be happy? Because if you're not happy, how are you going to help the poor? So I have no problem with people spending money on entertainment or other things in the world. Because the fact that you're even thinking about the poor or donating to worthy causes, and you've just asked me this question, proves you're doing all right. So never be self-loathing about spending more on entertainment and having fun. You should never do that, because that way lies madness. Enjoy your life. It'll be over soon enough, as something that I'm going to bring up at the end of this chat that I didn't know whether I was going to bring up, but I'm going to bring it up anyway, because something happened that I've been thinking about incessantly. That's part of this channel, and I wasn't going to talk about it, but I think I'm going to. Not quite yet, though. Stubble McShave says, the Iliad is one of the first fantasy books. I agree. That's Homer. You're talking thousands of years now. Absolutely. I love the Iliad. There's the Iliad. Somebody's got to write. Somebody's probably already written that parody. The Iliad and the Odyssey. I mean, you know, those are great books. Both of those books are great. They're swashbuckling adventure. Absolutely. And they've been around for how long? Long time. David Cabrera says, hi, RMB and all. Rob, what are your thoughts on Annihilation? I saw it last night. I thought it was great sci-fi. Jeff Vandermeer's Southern Reach trilogy. Read the books. I like the books. They're really interesting. They're very enigmatic. So if you have not seen Annihilation, it's based on one of the first book in Jeff Vandermeer's Southern Reach trilogy. It stars Natalie Portman. It was directed by the same man that wrote Dread and made Ex Machina. Alex Garland. He also wrote like Danny Boyle's The Beach and other things. I'm mixed on Annihilation. I wanted to love it. I thought it was really fun to watch. But at the end of the day, I thought it's sort of the message was a little muddled, but it's fun to watch. The premise is really intriguing, but I think it was unnecessarily it was kind of opaque to me. But then again, so were the books. And to me, it was kind of it's what I would call another impossible premise. And I would use a movie like Cube and the recent Escape Room that was directed by my good buddy Adam Robitel. An impossible premise where the premise is incredibly intriguing. Like, it's an irresistible premise, but at the end of the day, you can never really explain it all because there is no explanation. Like, if you haven't seen Cube, the movie Cube, Vincent Natali's Cube, it's basically a movie where these people wake up in a square room, or the one person wakes up in a square room, and this square room is only one room in a room of hundreds, if not thousands, of other square rooms that make up a giant cube. And all these people that are stuck in this cube are trying to make it outside of the cube. And it's a really intriguing movie, but you'll never know, where did this cube come from? I mean, they dealt with it sort of later in other movies, but in the original Cube, when I saw it in 1998, it's in Sitges, where Free Enterprise had its world premiere, and it won Sitges that year. I loved Cube, but at the end of the day, I want to know who built this cube. How did they build this cube? Where did they build this cube? You'll never know. Just like an escape room, the corporation or whatever, the game corporation, it's the escape room itself. It's impossible physically. Who would build it? Where would they build it? You just go with it because there are these, and I call them the impossible premise, because at the end of the day, it can never really be explained. Annihilation is kind of that way. It's kind of like the cave in Empire Strikes Back. What does it all mean? Well, it means only what you take with you. You define what it means. But I do like Annihilation. I think Alex Garland is an incredible voice. Ex Machina, I think, is a terrific movie about, well, let's face it, about the end of the world, but it's all set with 3 characters in a home. I love that. I think he's a great writer. I loved his script for Dread, and I heard he actually had a hand in directing it. So Annihilation is great it really is. I recommend watching it. It's enigmatic and will leave you, I think, unsatisfied, but I really do like Annihilation. And yes, I do own the Blu-ray. Square Wheel says, here's some more money for another hot toy. Square Wheel, that reminds me, I was going to do an auction today for a hot toy, but I just, the more I'm thinking about doing a live auction, it's probably just not going to work. And I've been talked out of it. Maybe I can try it again, but talked out of it. Doshi says, Star Wars 1 year, MCU 3 times a year. I don't get it. Well, I know the thing is, I think Star Wars, here's the problem. They look at Solo as a failure. Here's what people don't understand. All anybody cares about at a studio, all anybody cares about is that a movie performs and makes money. That's it. It is a product to be made and sold and exploited. That's all it is. If The Last Jedi comes out and makes $1 billion and every fanboy in the world is crying tears, they don't care. It made more money than it was supposed to. Now, some people say, well, what about, Force Awakens made $2 billion. It had to be. Last Jedi had to be a disappointment. No, because nobody ever thought in their wildest imaginings that The Force Awakens in Hollywood was going to make $2 billion. This was anomalous. The 900 million plus domestic box office on Force Awakens is anomalous. It's not going to come. It'll come once every, 20 years? So The Last Jedi making, 1.3 billion? That is a huge, epic win. So everybody's dissatisfaction over The Last Jedi, they don't care. And then everybody tries to look at, well, the toys aren't selling. The toys aren't selling because the world has changed. The toys aren't selling is because Toys R Us is gone. And kids today aren't playing with toys the same way they used to, let's face it, 40 plus years ago when Star Wars first came out. Look at where Star Wars toys have gone. It's the Black Series. The 3 3/4 inch figures have given way toward older collectors collecting 6-inch figures. It's just a different world. The world has changed, so you can't blame. They'll look at fans that don't like Last Jedi. They'll never understand that Last Jedi made $1.3 billion. The fact that ancillary sales are down has nothing to do with it. They'll make that up at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, selling droids and selling lightsabers in the first year. And it's something people need to understand. They need to understand. Fans are going to come. The more fans, do you know what all the bitching and moaning that fans do about Last Jedi is? Do you know what it is? It's publicity. Every fan that makes an but angry video about Last Jedi, they should get paid. They're doing the studio's work for them. The studios are just sitting back going, wow, we have a Star Wars movie that people are still talking about. They're still hashtagging on social media. Every company in the world wishes they had a product that people were as dissatisfied with as Last Jedi that made $1.3 billion at the box office. This is what isn't understood. We're still doing it. We're still talking about it. I'm talking about it right now. It's crazy, and nobody gets it. Unfortunately, what they do get is that Solo didn't work. And the funny thing is if they came out and made a great Obi-Wan movie with Ewan McGregor and it kicked ass, they could make more. They made one Star Wars film, a Star Wars story, Solo, a Star Wars story, underperformed, and they've destroyed the whole thing is gone. And they had Rogue One made over $1 billion. That was a Star Wars story too. And yet now it's all about Solo. You're only as good as your last movie. And it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me that, and Solo is pretty good. They don't look at the fact that most people that watch Solo, there's a lot of people, I guess, that don't like it, but when you watch it, you're like, hey, even people didn't go see it in the theater. For the most part, Solo is an enjoyable science fiction adventure film. It's like, oh, it's kind of inoffensive. Alden Ehrenreich does a fine job. He's just not Harrison Ford. The big problem with Solo is you're watching a movie asking you to believe that what you're seeing is Harrison Ford, and you're clearly not. So it's difficult to accept. And most people are like, I can't watch a movie about Han Solo that's not about Han Solo. But if they started out with a Star Wars story about Boba Fett, nobody would have that problem. You brought Ewan McGregor back to play Obi-Wan Kenobi, verisimilitude. It feels authentic. Making a Star Wars movie that has Harrison Ford as Han Solo is one thing, but making a Star Wars movie with somebody playing Solo that isn't Harrison Ford, it doesn't work. It'll never work. That movie could have been Gone with the Wind. It could have been Patton. It could have been Lawrence of Arabia. It could have been Citizen Kane, and it never would have worked. And what's surprising to me is that wasn't understood at the studio level. If they had waited, if they had made Solo as like the 4th or 5th Star Wars movie, and you were 5 years after The Force Awakens and Han Solo had been gone, then maybe it would have worked. Maybe it would have been interesting. Loquacious Primate says, however bots may be used on TV or movies, I think it's important to not let creatives or IP holders dismiss legitimate fan criticisms as merely bots. Listen, man, I don't think fan criticisms are merely bots. I don't. But I think that what they're doing, they're seizing upon any kind of hot button issue, now, whether it's abortion, healthcare, or yes, Captain Marvel, or the Last Jedi, any hot button issue that causes anybody to foam at the mouth, and these issues do, they are going to prey on those, because what they're doing is they're just sowing division throughout our society, division from the highest levels all the way down to our entertainment franchises. And that's what they're doing. They're dividing us, and they're doing, by the way, a beautiful job of it. I would like to give it up for the asymmetric ideological war that's being fought against the United States, because it's brand new. The tools didn't exist 20 years ago to even do it. As much as the Russians could have, you watch the Americans and they might have infiltrated our society, they never would have dreamed that somebody else would provide them with the tools to do what they do to world economies and to the United States on a daily basis. I mean, you know what? If they had dropped a bomb on New York City, God forbid, and a thermonuclear device and set it off in New York, what would that have done? That would end all of our ideological differences in the United States. Everybody would have rallied behind it. We would have gone rah-rah, because we did it. We did it after 9/11. There is no better way. Our society is slowly being undermined. Free speech, we now have college campuses where students are saying, we don't need free speech. One of the basic tenets of our democracy, free speech. Nah, we need to be nice to people, and I don't want to. It's incredible. It's incredible. They're doing a fine job of it. And I hand it to them, because wow, they just took what was given to them that we helped build. Indeed, Silicon Valley's in the United States. We provided this incredible technology, and it's being systematically used on a daily basis to undermine our democracy and divide us as people. It's fantastic. They've done a great job. And we're doing nothing. We don't even there hasn't been a government division set up to really do this that is big enough on such a scale to combat it the way we need to combat it. So give it up. But yeah, I'm not saying that creatives and IP holders dismiss fan criticisms. They don't. But fan criticisms have not yet translated, contrary to popular belief, to money yet. They haven't. Despite what people say, the Star Wars toys aren't selling as much as they used to. That's not a function of The Last Jedi. That's a function of the world we live in. So, yeah. Anyway, I got more letters, man. I'm not done with the letters. I read Orlando's letter. This one comes from, I like this. I got some geographical distance and new people writing me letters. This one comes from Derick Corey. Hello, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. My name is Derick Corey, and I'm writing to you from the great wide open state of Utah. I've been watching a show for some time now. I was first introduced to you through Collider Heroes, and you quickly became my favorite cast member. Aw, thank you. I admired your calm, reserved, and endlessly knowledgeable view on all things geek related. You have inspired me to delve deeper into my own obsessions and learn more about the history of things like Star Wars, superhero movies, and even Star Trek, even though I thought I knew a lot already. I love hearing that. You know who would have loved hearing that too is John Schnepp, who brought me onto Heroes. So thank you for that. Next month is the year since John passed, and I miss the guy every day. But what he loved was when he heard from other people that said that they were inspired by things that we'd covered. So thank you for that. I have been wanting to write to you for some time. I must admit, the thought of having someone I truly respect and admire read one of my letters to hundreds of people online makes me as giddy as seeing Captain America wielding Mjolnir. Well, almost. However, my reservation in writing came because I felt I had nothing worthwhile to share. I listen to these wonderful letters you read on your show, and I think to myself, that's so insightful and intelligent. I could never write something that would trigger such a great discussion. I could never write something so heartfelt and personal. That is, until I realized I was looking at it all wrong. As I approached the computer today to sit down and finally jam out a letter that has been simmering in my brain for some time now, I found myself wondering, okay, how would John Campea put this? Or how would Willow Yang talk and phrase her thoughts? Then I realized, as great as those people are, it doesn't matter. I knew I needed to write my letter in a way that was most personal to me. I needed to write the notorious RMB a letter from me and me alone. I love this. What follows is an extremely personal, and I hope that it will be what follows is extremely personal, and I hope that it will be treated as such. That being said, here we go. Rob, I want to thank you. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart and even the bottom of my soul. I have never before seen a platform like yours that is so dedicated to the passions of the mind and the soul, all wrapped up in a layer of kindness, thoughtfulness, and respect. You approach every letter you read and you approach every letter you read and every experience you encounter with such grace. I appreciate it. You will never know how much an environment like this means to me. Allow me to explain. I am a Mormon, a proud Mormon, a devoted Mormon. As a Mormon, it breaks my heart to see how my religion is treated so often in popular culture. We are ridiculed for our past, mocked for our beliefs, and in the past, and perhaps even now, we've been killed. I do not seek to say that Mormonism has had the worst time, nor say that I myself am subject to as much ridicule and persecution as other religions. Surely, every people, race, creed, and gender have been subjugated to oppression at one point or another. I tried desperately to never joke about another religion, even when I'm only trying to be funny, because I know the hurt and embarrassment it can cause. Perhaps Mormons are a little weird. Perhaps I myself am a little weird because not only do I practice this religion, but I also genuinely like the Star Wars prequels. Sue me. When I was a boy living in the secluded suburbs of Utah, I thought that Mormons were just widely accepted and everybody loved us. Sure, I knew that some of my neighbors weren't of our religion, but I never so much as batted an eye at it. They treated us kindly and we treated them kindly. The first interaction I had with someone I knew was not of my religion came in the form of my next-door neighbor when I was merely 5 or 6 years of age. Now, I know this will sound utterly hypocritical, but stick with me. I was nervous when I first met them. They were Catholics, which meant they didn't believe what I believed. They prayed differently. They went to church differently. Heck, they even had different paintings on the wall. One day, my parents had to go out of town for something, and they sent me over to my neighbors for a play date. I was shy at first and perhaps a little uncomfortable as well. That is, until I saw what one of the boys had on the kitchen counter. A Lego Slave One. That day flew by because I bonded with a now lifelong friend of mine over a simple Lego Star Wars ship. We spent the entire afternoon playing with that thing and as many other Lego ships and crafts. It was the most fun I remembered having as a small child. I'm sorry to wax long, Mr. Burnett, and I hope you will forgive me. My point is this. Whether you're a Mormon, a Catholic, a Jew, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, white, black, or even orange. We can all bond over movies. My knowledge of Star Wars and movies in general has helped me bridge gaps between many of my peers. As I've grown older, I've realized some of the true hatred in the world directed at Mormonism and religions in general. It kills me, as I'm sure it does for many in the Post-Geek Singularity. Our beliefs are not that dissimilar. I'm sure you will find I was raised to hold three things as the highest law. 1, respect for my mother. 2, serve others whenever possible. 3, watch and love Star Wars if convenient, and if inconvenient, watch it anyway. Religious or not, we're all geeks. We all love movies. Is it too much to ask that the world see us for who we are and what we love rather than judge us by our skin or our religion? That is why I love your channel so much, R&B. For years, I've watched TV, movies, and listened to podcasts, and the moment that anyone mentions Mormons, I tense up because I know what follows will not be good. I've never felt that way with you or the Post-Geek Singularity. Thank you, Rob. Your kindness and respect you show to all peoples mean more to us than you will ever know. Sincerely, your brother in movies, Derick Corey. Well, that says it all right there to me. I mean, it's really interesting. That letter points out something that I've always said, and people that have known me, like whenever I've gone places, like whenever I've gone to the UK, and when I meet Terry for the first time face to face, I'll do the same thing, and he'll remind me that I brought this up once on Robservations, which is when I go to the UK, I can either bring up Doctor Who, the Thunderbirds, or I don't know, the Tripods, some genre show, Blake 7, or something. I can talk about some MI6, or as it was called, or MI5, or as it was called in the UK spooks. If I bring up something, some kind of pop culture touchstone or music, the synth, the British invasion of the early 80s, I'm always looking for a pop culture reference wherever I go that can help break the ice. Like whenever I meet somebody from Japan, I'll talk about Space Battleship Yamato, or I'll sing the song. I'll go Yamato, because that's how it's sung in Japan. Well, not quite like that, and then people go, oh yeah, And I've always found that having my vast knowledge of pop culture has at least helped me bridge the gap. Now, some of these people that I don't quite understand their culture, they're like, oh, that dude's a nerd. I'm sure there's some of that going on. But I think what you just point out is that, our baseline is like what you said. Everyone's got a mom. Now, before, people are like, do you think that all women should be mothers? No, I don't. But I know one thing. I know all of us have mothers, until we're being birthed in birthing chambers, like in Logan's Run or however they did that. We've all got moms. And there's a baseline that we can approach everybody with. And I think that is at least openness, kindness, and humanity, if that's our baseline to start. And, I understand what you're saying. And it would bum me out if I was defined only as one thing. And I think that nobody is ever one thing. And now these days we're so quick to define people by one facet of their personality. I am pro-choice when it comes to things like a woman's right to choose. And a lot of people have found that surprising since I came so close to never existing. But again, I always believe in the rights of the individual, but I don't necessarily, I will not pillory somebody because they don't believe in abortion. I personally, I don't like abortion. I don't. I think the idea of it is not, it's not great. It's not a good look, but sometimes it is necessary for a number of reasons. And I believe that a person should have that right to choose, but there are people that have huge conviction the other way. And who am I to say that they're wrong? And what we need to do in this day and age is, and religion, all of our religious beliefs, we have to honor those beliefs. The movie Tango Shalom that I'm working on is all about that. The ultimate message is it preaches a intolerance, and that you is bad, and that you should be accepting, and that, like you had said, your next door neighbor who is Catholic and you who are Mormon, your common ground was Star Wars. and you can still have both of your beliefs, and yet you found something that you both can also love. And that's a perfect example of how the power of the Post-Geek Singularity community, the power of this stuff to unite people. And that's the funny thing. In most of my life, I've seen this unite everybody. It was with the advent of social media. It's so funny. Rick Berman, I've said this before, Rick Berman, who produced all of Star Trek from 1987 to 2005, he said once that he's often said that the internet was born through pornography and Star Trek. In 88, my first experience with a BBS service was my college roommate at the time had set up a computer that had 20 people could call in. This is in September of 88. 20 people could call in, and we had a Star Trek BBS where we would just talk. I would literally go online with strangers, and all you had was like green text, and we'd talk Star Trek. And what was so funny was I was like, wow, there's all these people that even if I passed by them on the street, I'd never know who they were. But there's all these people out there, randos, that love Star Trek as much as I do. And it was sort of uplifting. It was the first time I'd really experienced the internet, the greater world out there. And unfortunately, we have a lot of vitriol, but I've always believed, and look, I haven't changed. I didn't come through. This isn't an act that I'm putting on. I mean, this is just me, and I've been this way my whole life. And I've always been like, hey, let's go play Star Wars. Let's go play G.I. Joes. I've always tried to find some common ground because, isn't that what Buckaroo Banzai said? Wherever you go, there you are. And if that's where you are, why not make the most of it? See, the two movies that have sort of the guiding principles of my life, well, Buckaroo Banzai, wherever, there you go, there you are. And Mike Damone. Who is Mike Damone, you may ask? Mike Damone is a character from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And there's a scene in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which is funny because last week I was at a birthday party and we're in a bar and Fast Times at Ridgemont High came on. And I love in bars when if you're a pub owner, you own a bar and you have movies playing, please turn on the subtitles so we can watch the subtitles. I hadn't seen Fast Times, but there's a scene when Mike Damone's trying to tell his friend Mark Ratner on how to act on a date. And his philosophy is, no matter where you go, act like that's the place to be. And then he puts his arm around the Debbie Harry cutout, the full-size Debbie Harry of Blondie cut out at the record store. And he's like, Debbie, isn't this great? And he gestures out to them all. Because, there's a movie, if you guys haven't seen Swingers. Swingers is a great movie that Doug Liman directed, that Jon Favreau wrote. Vince Vaughn, it's Jon Favreau and Vince Vaughn's big breakthrough role, but it's all about dudes in LA. It heavily influenced Free Enterprise. But one of the things that was funny about Swingers, it's these guys that go from party to party in LA and they're never happy with the party they're at. They always move to another party. And I had the exact opposite experience when I was younger in Los Angeles, out with my friends. I always would say that, look, man, this party might not be bumping. It might not be what you want, but let's see what we can do here. Let's see what we can have happen. Because I know one thing, if we're driving for another half an hour, that's a half an hour less of the night we have to spend. And who knows who's going to walk through that door in 10 minutes? And who knows what's going to happen as the party rages a little further and people have had a little more to drink, or you just never know. And the thing is, you could spend your whole night in search of something, some transcendent experience that you're never going to have. But if you stay in one place and cultivate what it is you've got going on, I always found, to this day, I've always found that it's better to do that. So anyway, I want to thank you for your letter. And I think that's what the Post-Geek Singularity is really all about, that everybody can come here and be respected and have their interests. You know what? We are, all of us, we're all looking for our Lego Slave One ships. And I think this is the place to come to find that. And it'll leave you with a great afternoon or a great morning or whenever you listen to this. And I think that's pretty cool. This next letter comes from Angel Sabino, member of the Post-Geek Singularity. Hello, Mr. Burnett. First of all, thank you for reading the letter I sent asking about the state of collecting physical media in the first week of June. This brings me to commenting on your June 12th video. Great letter from Mr. Wigglesworth. Ah, the days of Laserdiscs. I also worked for a video store company back in the 90s that you might remember. Tower Records and Video. Oh man, in Seattle, Tower Records on Mercer Street. It's like Mecca. I went there once a week. This was actually a great time in my life where I enjoyed going to work every day. By the way, there is an incredible documentary about Tower Records and what it meant. And it was directed by Colin Hanks, Tom Hanks' son. And it's called, I think it's called All Things Must Pass. Hang on, let me check. I believe it is. Yes, All Things Must Pass, Tower Records. Hang on, I'm just going to check on this so you know, because yes, All Things Must Pass, the rise and fall of Tower Records. If you guys want to see a great pop culture documentary, Colin Hanks, Tom Hanks' son, directed All Things Must Pass, the rise and fall of Tower Records. I cannot recommend it highly enough, especially if you ever used to shop at Tower Records. Oh man, I'm telling you. Anyway, Tower Records video. Back to the letter. And this was actually a great time in my life where I enjoyed going to work every day. It is also when I was exposed to the Laserdisc format. I bought my first Laserdisc at Tower Records. I had, over the years, amassed a large collection of films on VHS and Beta. Yes, Beta. When I began working at Tower Video and I was living the dream, access to every new video release, meeting movie stars like Whoopi Goldberg, Giancarlo Esposito, Kathleen Turner, and Christian Slater, this is getting to a point. I went from being a security guard to being a buyer for the Laserdisc department, and my life was changed. My brother, me too. I've never met another buyer for the laser video disc division except my friend Craig Hyland. At this point, I had no clue or understanding about aspect ratio, but quickly I did learn. One of my favorite films at the time was Die Hard, and I, of course, had it on VHS, but then I saw it on Laserdisc. Came out in 1988 on Laserdisc. And damn, did everything change for me at that point. I couldn't believe how much information I was missing from my pan and scan tapes. I know, shocking, right? The horror I felt realizing how terrible it was to watch films on VHS just floored me. I quickly began hunting down all of my favorite films on Laserdisc. Of course, being a buyer in this store just made it easier for me to acquire many foreign discs. Some I remember were the Guyver, Gamera, and many Godzilla films. I don't even want to think about the money I was spending at this point in my life when I didn't even have it, but I had to have my LDs. Oh my God, that was me too. And they were ungodly expensive, those Japanese imports. I remember the day that I met Christian Slater and had him sign a Laserdisc copy of Heathers that I was picking up that same day. Oh, the memories. I hung on to the format as long as possible, but like you stated, the times would change. Players were no longer being made, I believe, around the early 2000s, and DVD had taken us all by storm. So guess what? I followed with it. And woe was my wallet. I felt I would always be able to keep my Laserdisc collection, but sadly my players did break down, and also I had much of my collection affected by the dreaded laser rot. Oh, the tears. So once again, I was rebuying things on DVD, which of course led to Blu-ray. I haven't replaced all of my DVDs with Blu-ray because sadly enough of it was getting way too expensive. Now we have 4K. No, I have not jumped on this bandwagon yet. Which brings me to my question. I know you have discussed this already and even answered me about collecting before, but I wonder, do you really feel it was a necessary thing to move to the 4K format? I struggle with this whenever I walk into Best Buy and see all these new transfers on 4K while I rummage through the $4.99 Blu-ray bin. I love film. I love my films, but I can't seem to justify doing this again with another format. I know it will eventually be my choice, but how do you really feel about this? Will we be doing this again in 10 years when the next format is unleashed upon us? I end this letter as I'm about to pop in my 3D Blu-ray of Doctor Strange. Yes, I have several 3D Blu-rays. I have that 3D Blu-ray. I got it from the UK. Beta, VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, Blu-ray, 4K. Oh my. Thank you in advance if you decide to read this. Always eager to hear your words. Angel S, or if you fancy it, Xavier12202. Live long and prosper. Well, Angel, thanks for this letter because, man, I lived at Tower Records. I had a routine. I would go every week to Tower Records, usually on Friday or Saturday. I either went down after school or on Saturday before or after work because it was open till midnight. And I would buy vinyl. I'd buy import 12-inch remixes, usually of British bands. By the way, The Cult is playing tonight at the Greek Theater here in LA, and I'm not going, just saying. But I would buy 12 inches. Then I would go look at their import CD section because I found music that I didn't even like, bands like A Certain Ratio that were on Factory Records. I was like, ooh, I'll buy anything that's on anything that Factory put out, because they put out New Order. Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Trevor Horn's label, ZTT, Zang Tum Tum. If there was ever anything that was on ZTT, actually, I think A Certain Ratio was on ZTT. Now that I think about it, no, maybe it wasn't. I don't remember. See, it's all a fog. Or 4AD that put out like Cocteau Twins, early Bauhaus, Clan of Zymox. I mean, there were record labels I bought. There's just any CD that would come out. By the way, there's a great book that came out in the UK, and I forget the name of it, but it's about the history of 4AD records. It's like as big as a phone book. If you guys like, you remember Pump Up the Volume, Pump Up the Volume, Pump Up. That was a 4AD release. Pump Up the Volume, dance, dun 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 dun. Anyway, I digress. But Tower Records. So I would go there and I would look at the 12 inches. I'd look at the import CDs. I'd look at the laser discs, and I'd look at the soundtracks. And I did that every single week. And I usually dropped, back then it wasn't expensive. Import CDs were ungodly expensive, and Japanese laserdiscs were ungodly expensive. But, you know, you could get away with a great haul from Tower Records for $100. And I had a job, so that didn't seem like it was too much. But I miss Tower Records. And I kind of got that same experience from the Virgin Megastore here. But then that went away too. And then Tower Records added books as well, which was kind of neat. Let's see. Dale M sent me another super chat. Thank you for that. Alexander Wilson says, studios are using legacy IPs like X-Men and Men in Black, but the new movies are lazy and don't bring anything new to the table and don't move the properties forward. What is your opinion on the matter? Alexander Wilson, you were dead on, son, right there. I totally agree with what you just said. The problem is, again, it's sort of the biggest problem Hollywood has is when you're making a Men in Black movie or you're making an X-Men movie, they're very expensive. And the studios they're not sitting on large liquid cash reserves to spend $150 million or $200 million of their own money. They have to borrow that money, which means they're incurring interest charges immediately. So the studios, by definition, must be risk averse. If they're spending that kind of money, they want to know. They're looking at a spreadsheet. And here's the killer. Here's the real problem. These franchise properties like Men in Black and X-Men, there's no way to make them cheap. You can't do it. Studios don't know how to make. I mean, I remember when Terminator 2 was made, it's like, oh my God, the first $100 million movie or something. And they were making it on a compressed schedule. It came out in like a year from the time it was announced. So that was in the early 90s, huge game changer for Hollywood, $100 million movie. Now we just scoff. Endgame was what, $350 million? But so you have a lot of money involved. And what they have to do is, again, they don't understand. They're looking at it from a spreadsheet perspective. I mean, Simon Kinberg, I was just watching the third season of Designated Survivor because I love the first half of the first season. Then that show went to hell. And somebody said, no, the third season's good. So it is. I started watching. It was good. I forgot Simon Kinberg was an executive producer of Designated Survivor. So on a spreadsheet, Men in Black and X-Men still look good. Because if people don't remember, but both X-Men Days of Future Past and Apocalypse were the two most successful X-Men proper, the X-Men team movies worldwide. Days of Future Past was like $750 million, and Apocalypse was $550 million. And sure, Apocalypse was a down step from Days of Future Past, but the X-Men franchise as a whole, very viable. Two movies making, over $1 billion. That's pretty good franchise. And then Deadpool, $750 million, Deadpool 2 even more, Logan. It was a very viable franchise. But the problem is they want to give you what you've been getting. They're not going to radically reimagine these franchises. They want to give you, it's easier for them. It's easier to go and justify spending that money on a known commodity than it is an unknown commodity. And what's really sad about the studios is, from a studio filmmaking level, they're now making spectacles. All the movies that we grew up loving, and I would say John McTiernan is a perfect example. The man directed Predator. He directed Die Hard. He directed Hunt for Red October. Those films, I think it was what, 87, 88, and 90? That was the pinnacle of studio filmmaking when directors were making mid-level, we're talking 20 million to 70 million dollar movies that were powerhouse action adventure adult dramas that made a lot of money. These films were making a lot of cash, and everyone loved them. Studios don't know how to make those movies anymore. They don't know how to market them. They don't even know what the audience is. So if you look at what we're getting now, there's movies like now it's Angel Has Fallen. You had I loved Olympus Has Fallen, London Has Fallen. Olympus Has Fallen is the new Die Hard, and London Has Fallen was Die Hard 2. And now Olympus Has Fallen is going to be Die Hard with a vengeance. But these movies that we grew up with that the big studios were making have now become B movies, like real B movies. They used to be B movies with A-list stars and A-list budgets. That's what the studios are doing. Now nobody's doing that. So, Jared Butler is making a good living starring in these movies that were once studio pictures. Now Millennium Films is making them. They're shooting them in Bulgaria or wherever. And the whole filmmaking process has changed, and the studios don't know what to do with themselves. And by the way, one of the reasons that Netflix is so attractive to, say, filmmakers, and same with Amazon, is it's a buyout. You make a movie for Netflix, or Netflix buys your movie. Like, I'll give you an example. So Tango Shalom is not an expensive film, but if, say, we were able to sell it, God forbid, if we could, hope, sell it for a couple of $1 million, $2 or $3 million or something, even if we were to sell it to a Netflix, or that's a huge win for a low budget filmmaker, because you don't have to have a theatrical release. I mean, sure, do you want to get filthy rich? But a movie like Tango Shalom was never designed to be that. But if we were able to sell it that way, there's no risk. We get our money back. Everybody makes a chunk of change they can put away. The film is on Netflix. It gets a worldwide audience. That's an epic win. So independent filmmakers, everybody wants to get picked up by a Netflix, because putting out a movie in the theaters now, unless it's a giant spectacle, as you read however many op-ed pieces about this summer, how even the franchise properties are faltering, because people do want to see new movies, Alexander. They do want to see something they haven't seen before. But the studios, at the level they're working, they can't afford to give you a $150 million movie that no one's seen that IP. It's a risk. They can't believe. Now, I would have said, why not start a new franchise and spend $35 million on it? They can't, because they're like, well, then we'd have to spend another 35 or 40 or 50 million marketing the film. The motion picture studios, Disney and Universal, they've got their big franchises. You got Fast and the Furious, you've got Jurassic Park, you've got those franchises. Disney's got their franchises. They're making like 8 movies a year, and then they got Marvel, they got Lucasfilm, whatever. They're making spectacles. They're basically, every Disney movie now is a roller coaster. They're building a giant roller coaster for you, whether it's Toy Story 4, whether it's Episode 9, whether it's Frozen 2. They're coming out, and they're IPs that people know. And unfortunately, we're not going to get new IPs. And I think it's a bummer. I think it's a bummer that we're not getting these new franchises, because look, if you look at Creed, I mean, they made Creed for not a lot of money. And look at a movie like The Matrix. When The Matrix came out, it came out of nowhere. $65 million. The Wachowskis had made Bound, this little movie. That's what we've got to start doing. But there's nobody even at the studios that can recognize. People at Warner Brothers, by the way, didn't all recognize. They're like, what is The Matrix? The Wachowskis came in with all like Jeff Darrow art, and they didn't know what to do with it. They're like, oh, okay. Joel Silver will produce it. Well, he knows what he's doing, But the studios now aren't even equipped to make non-franchise movies. They don't know how. They don't know how to market them, and there's too much money involved. And unfortunately, it bums me out, because I agree. We need people that understand and know their franchises. You can no longer take somebody like, Alex Kurtzman, he wrote a Star Trek movie, and he's got this long track record with Bad Robot. So, let's let him make a whole Star Trek series. Let's do that. Why? Well, he was okay working on these other shows, so he certainly could make Star Trek. I mean, that's, to them, it's interchangeable. It's whatever franchise property. It doesn't necessarily, it's the franchise that's going to carry the property. No, it's not. It's always the execution. It's got to be a good story, well told. Never put your characters Never put your universe before your characters, the Burnett axiom. And that's what they're doing because they think, ooh, we'll bring back MI5 or Men in Black. But you know what? Tessa Thompson and Chris Hemsworth, awesome, awesome, awesome choice to be in that movie. Great cast, great pairing, coming off of Ragnarok. That looked great on a spreadsheet. But they hired F. Gary Gray, who's a man that's not really working in his wheelhouse. And, you know, again, studio director coming off Fast and Furious 8, Fate of the Furious. Sure, he's a franchise director now. Let's give him this movie. Well, why not find somebody that loved Men in Black? Why not find the Ryan Coogler of what he did with Rocky? Find that for the Men in Black franchise. Find somebody who's passionate about Men in Black. But they don't do that. They look at the list of the same 10 people that are making franchise movies and be like, oh, we'll pick one of those people. Because those are the only people that they can justify. They can go to a bank and go, this person just directed The Fate of the Furious. This person made over $1 billion worldwide. So we can hire him to direct a $200 million, $150 million Men in Black movie rather than go, you know, this is why the MCU is so successful. Because Kevin Feige is handpicking his talent and he's not basing the people that are directing these movies on their past box office. He's picking them because he sees something in the work that they've done. Like, oh, look what they did in Community. I bet they could make Captain America the Winter Soldier work. He sees that. And he makes that leap because he's got the power and the knowledge and the ability and understanding to do it. But he's one of the only people in Hollywood. Anyway, I'm going off. I don't know why. The next person who's here is Victory Unlimited Show. I love saying that. By the way, good to see you. Thanks for coming back. Victory Unlimited Show says, I love the narration in the Shang-Chi comic. Shang even took over the narration of other folks' books whenever he guest starred. Oh, I love that. Laugh out loud. You think we'll get to hear his voiceovers about games of deceit and death in his movie? First of all, I've thought about this. Yes, Shang-Chi was a staple of the book that he, well, not in all of them, but in a lot of them, he narrates the books, he narrates the stories. They have to do that. And by the way, there's never been an MCU movie with that kind of narration before. How cool would that be? You know, it's not going to be, I don't think it's like Morgan Freeman in Shawshank Redemption style narration, but wouldn't it, I can guarantee you they're going to do that. Guarantee you, because they've never done that in an MCU movie. And this is so part of that world. It's so part of that comic. You know, it's really interesting. One of the things I love voiceover narration in movies. I've always loved it. I know it's in screenwriting class, like, don't do voiceover narration, but I love it. I dream. I have a dream project that has a lot of voiceover narration in it. I have the script, but it's, you know, I could never get it financed because I directed a movie once 100 years ago and it made no money, but I've got to do another movie, but it'll be my third movie. It'll be the movie that I'm wanting to do. It's going to be the movie after that. But it's got a great script and voiceover narration. But like in Shawshank Redemption, they recorded Morgan Freeman's narration before they shot the movie, which I thought was really a great way to go. I think that's what a great question, man. I hope that Victory Unlimited, you are correct. I would like to see Shang-Chi do his own narration. Aaron H. says, I might be alone, but I'd like a sequel to the original Cloverfield film. That monster was badass, and I'm a sucker for apocalyptic event films. Well, Aaron H., I too am a sucker for giant monster and apocalyptic movies. I loved Cloverfield. I'll tell you something funny. I tried to show it to my girlfriend, Elizabeth, and for whatever reason, I didn't realize this. My Blu-ray just got all sketchy. It got all sketched out at the end, and we could not see the last 10 minutes. She'd never seen it before, and I'm like, what's with my Blu-ray, dude? That's the only Blu-ray it ever happened to, and I've never replaced it. But I would love to see that. I'm like, when they started saying, oh, we're going to do Cloverfield Lane, I'm like, ooh, is the monster coming back? I mean, where did that monster come from? I know it was underwater. Like, where did it go? There must have been another one. How's the world respond? I don't know. But I'm with you 100%. Ron the Good Boy says, howdy, Mr. B. New here and look forward to supporting the Robert Meyer Burnett Network. Love the content. For now, greetings from North Dakota. This has been very representative of the United States. We've got North Dakota. We got Utah. I mean, this is great. All of our great states are represented. Timbula the Spider Monkey is here. Hey, Rob. By the way, I just love that name. I love your name. I'm getting my girlfriend's nephew, who's 10, into model building. I bought him a few of the Bandai Star Wars kits and we'll build and paint them together. Any suggestions on easier kits for a kid? Well, they make a lot of Bandai Star Wars kits that are kid friendly, and I think that's a pretty good place to start. There are, I hate to say this, but the Star Trek Discovery kits that have recently come out, the Shenzhou and the Discovery, are the Shenzhou is passable. I could accept that as a Starship design, but they've got snap kits of those. And I'll tell you what, here's a suggestion, little off the wall. I was talking about Gundam models. Gundam models are great because they're snapped together kits. They can be complex, but some of those kits are pretty damn cool. And you can make a decent model that's a good display model without having to paint them. Always painting models is better, but that's Gundam models are cool. I don't know if he even knows what Gundam is, but if not, you can get into the animation too, because that's pretty dope. But anyway, good question. I love that. And right back. Tell me what you think about. I want to hear about that experience. Now, this is the last letter of the day of these great letters. Wow, this has been a long chat, but I'm going. You guys seem to be digging it. So this one comes from Aaron Brown. Notorious R&B. I'd like to share how I became a subscriber to the John Campea show and subsequently to your show. I was sitting at LAX, bored, surfing YouTube. For some reason, YouTube fed me an option of a guy reviewing the Mr. Rogers documentary. I think I'd watched a review on the same documentary by Jeremy Johns. Anyway, I clicked on it. And there was this freak waxing poetic about the glory of Mr. Rogers. There was something about him. He had screen presence, but mainly he was an adult male unabashedly broadcasting his love of Mr. Rogers. I didn't even know I wanted to see this documentary, but now I had to see it. I remember glancing around the airport at other waiting passengers. I had to repress the urge to share the revelation that we needed to see this documentary. Thankfully, I was successful in repressing this urge, and I didn't waste my 15 minutes of fame as the news story titled LAX passenger carted off in a straitjacket ranting about Fred Rogers. The reason I bring this up to you is you mentioned you were hoping the Captain Marvel topic would grow the channel. Growing your audience is a good thing, but I wanted to say I don't tune into your channel because you rehash what is already all over the internet. I tune in because you are a freak. You introduce me to new things, make me think about new topics, and give a new perspective I hadn't considered. I like it when you passionately talk about something I didn't even know desperately needed my attention. By the way, thank you for introducing me to Space Battleship Yamato 2199. You are welcome, sir, and wait till you get to 2202. Whew. It wasn't the Captain Marvel controversy, toxic Star Wars discussion, or any other clickbait that brought me to your channel. It was Fred Rogers. So please don't change your content too much chasing clicks. To quote a famous Marvel character, it matters not what others do. The Silver Surfer must be true to himself. P.S. Have you ever read Steve Englehart's Silver Surfer run? Yes, I have. It was my intro into the Marvel comic universe, the Marvel Cosmics. He says Marvel Cosmic, and it was pretty great in my opinion. Steve Englehart was an incredible creator back in the day. I love Steve Englehart. Well, that was the last of these letters. I'm gonna tell you something I've been thinking about. I was gonna talk about on the show. I've been contemplating it all day, and I'm going to end on this note. I just want to talk about it because it's been weighing on me for a couple days. So there was somebody named I knew him on Twitter, Dr. Kent Nelson, which is of course Dr. Fate from the DC universe. John Zellers was his name. He first started watching me about 3 years ago. I know exactly, it was May of 2016, and he only ever contacted me via direct message on Twitter, and we talked a lot, and we talked about a lot of things, genre stuff, comic book movies. About 3 weeks ago, he contacted me about something that I had tweeted online, and I tweeted in reference to white privilege or something. I said, my tweet was, you know what the ultimate privilege is? Being alive. That's what I wrote. And John wrote me back a very different missive than he'd ever written me before. If I really believe that. And he said, what if life isn't a privilege? And he started talking about the fact that he had survived 2 suicide attempts, and he had a different opinion of me about life. He said, what if life is so hard and painful and the pain never goes away? And he asked me if I would talk about this on the show. And I resisted. I said, I'm not a mental health professional. I don't think that I'm qualified to discuss it. But we went back and forth, and he was respectful. Then he went back to asking me about Star Wars, things like that. And Thursday, he wrote me again, and he asked me if I would consider talking about what we'd written. And we had a pretty lengthy back and forth about the subject of suicide. This was on Thursday. I found out that yesterday morning he took his own life. And I was going to spend a lot more time talking about this on the show, but people said, maybe you shouldn't. I was talking to Elizabeth about this. I talked to Mike a little bit about this. And, I found out a friend of his also wrote me when I asked if it was true. His friend said it was indeed true. But I went back and I read what John said. And his friend also said that he'd known John for years and they worked together, and he was in enormous physical pain and for a very long time. And he leaves behind a wife. And I just wanted to acknowledge him. I mean, John was definitely very much a member of the Post-Geek Singularity community. He passionately loved films and television and comic books, and he loved hockey. His friend told me that if he were a superhero, he really identified with John Stewart, the Green Lantern from the DC universe. And I think that I just want to acknowledge John, Dr. Kent Nelson on Twitter, and to tell him that, for the 3 years that we had an online friendship, I really enjoyed that friendship, and I cherished that friendship. And I was completely unaware that he was in any kind of physical pain. He was always, like everybody else, talking about our Post-Geek Singularity, the things that we like. And, I could go back and share what he wrote, but I don't want to do that right now. I just wanted to acknowledge his friendship. And I hope that I was able to provide some comfort in his life. He told me very much that I did, but I'm sorry he's no longer with us. And I would just say that, I was thinking about what he said. He said that he was in terrible, horrible pain, and for a very, very long time, for apparently 8 years. And I don't want to judge. And I think that if, he made a decision, and I respect the decision that he made. And the way he put it to me was, he always said that, I'm going to read what he said, his last thing. He said that people say that suicide is selfish. I ask you, what is more selfish? Me making the choice to end my crippling pain by ending my life, or a loved one wanting me to be here despite how bad my pain is? Which one is more selfish? I'm pretty sure you can tell which side I'm on. I can't argue with him. And while I will miss our interactions on Twitter, I hope now that his pain has been eased, and whatever awaits us in the afterlife, and I would like to believe that it's pretty awesome. I don't necessarily think heaven is the way we believe it is, but I'm sure it's another plane of existence. And look, man, I hope it's like walking into a party and somebody hands you a great martini. And I'd like to believe that John Zellers, Dr. Kent Nelson on Twitter, is partying in the afterlife, free of any pain that he felt. But I want to thank him for his friendship over the last 3 years, and to know that I thought about him. So anyway, I will bring this chat to a close. I once again want to thank all of you for the generous support you're giving to this channel via super chats and joining at the website. And there's more people have written in. Well, I'm not done yet, folks. After that, I hope people are still here. But Jonathan Peck sent in a chat. Have you ever heard or seen Nightmare Alley 1947? I have seen Nightmare Alley. It's been a long time. I saw it in a film noir class, I want to say. Should I watch it since Del Toro and Bradley Cooper are remaking it? Can you tell me what it is? Well, first of all, any movie that was made in the 40s, you should watch. And And I want to know. I want to know who directed it because I don't remember. But you should watch. Okay, 19. Yes, Edmund Golding. Okay, Tyrone Power. Okay, yes. Um, yes. The answer to your question is yes. You need to watch Nightmare Alley. It's directed by Edmund Golding. It stars Tyrone Power and Joan Blondell, who, of course, is very famous. And it's about the rise and fall of Stanton Carlisle. That's right. That's right. Oh, it's all coming back to me. Yes, you've got to watch this movie. Nightmare Alley is great. Stanton Carlisle, a mentalist whose lies and deceit proved to be his downfall. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. We have new. Look at this. Come here. Come up here. Come here, Tallulah. Oh, Tallulah just got groomed, everybody. Look at this. Here's the way to end the day. Little Tallulah got her first grooming. How are you? Oh, are you cute? Look at that. Okay. Oh, you smell good. And and Gilbert's groom. Wow, these dogs are the cutest dogs ever. Anyway, you've got to watch Nightmare Alley now that you have to watch it. It's amazing. Anyway, so Jonathan, watch that movie. Sorry, you could not see a dog in this show, right? Alexander Wilson says Daniel Alter advocates. I love Daniel Alter. Daniel Alter advocates that. By the way, Daniel Alter, if you watch Star Wars, I saw Daniel Alter waiting in line to see Phantom Menace in Westwood. I'm actually in the movie with him. Daniel Alter advocates that mid-range movies should go to streaming because they can't make significant money in the theaters. It's interesting that Netflix's most watched show now is When They See Us. For those of you who don't know, When They See Us is Ava DuVernay's mini-series limited series about the men that were accused, the Central Park Five, accused of raping a jogger in Central Park, and they were railroaded by the system, by everybody that wanted to scapegoat them. Incredible story, and that shows that racism is alive and well in America. But it's an incredible story, and I agree. Look, the problem with mid-range movies is mid-range movies like Hunt for Red October are really too expensive to be made by Netflix. Although we talked about Annihilation earlier, and Annihilation became a Netflix film. So, but Daniel's right. The studios don't know how to market mid-range. People are not going to go see mid-range movies. I wonder if Hunt for Red October would even make any money if it came out. I'd like to believe it would. But the world has changed. You know, those movies are gone now, and it's really kind of a bummer. Anyway, you're right. And Daniel's right, too. Stubble McShave says, a corporation doing a movie after a formula rarely have the necessary passion and vision to make it great. Movies are art, and that's created by passion. Stubble, I agree with you. You can't make franchise movies without passion. And unfortunately, franchise movies are usually started in the boardroom, or they're started in the office of a senior vice president, a creative executive, or a senior VP that came from an Ivy League background, and they're looking at spreadsheets. They're not making these movies because a filmmaker. I didn't think F. Gary Gray walked in and said, oh my God, I love the Men in Black franchise. I have to make this movie. No, they went to F. Gary Gray and said, would you direct this? Through his people. And he's like, well, you know, F. Gary Gray got to eat. So I made how much money on Fate of the Furious? Sure, I'll direct your next franchise property because, and by the way, he probably did the best job he could. But, you know, F. Gary Gray has done some other pretty cool movies. And I think that he probably, you know, it's probably not something that he was that passionate about until he found out how much he was getting paid. And by the way, I don't blame him at all. But Men in Black, and they got, by the way, they got the best people to make that movie. But the passion for the movie, where's the passionate filmmaker? Where was the Ryan Coogler whose mission was the Rocky franchise because he loved it so much? Gilbert, hey buddy, come here. Oh my God, I can't believe. Look at these guys. Come here. You want a cookie? I have a cookie. I'm kind of running out of cookies. Do I have one? Oh, these are gone. I'm out of cookies, you guys. Oh, I got a few. Here they come. You want to come up here? Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Look at this. Tallulah's she knows what's up. Here's one for Gilbert. Oh man, these dogs. I can't deal with the cuteness. The cuteness. See, anyway, how's this? I mean, don't you want to end your Saturday afternoon like this? I know you do. Oh, she's so soft. Oh my God, I'm dying. I'm dying of the cuteness. Yeah, you like that? Oh, no, I don't have any more. I got to get more. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know. You guys still here? I'm going to end this chat. I want to say, first of all, to everybody, thank you for being here. Thanks for supporting the channel. I want to remind everyone again that this chat is brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's Grooming Products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And you can go to their website at getluckytiger.com. And if you punch in PGS for Post-Geek Singularity for the community here, you get 20% off your order. And they are still having their summer sweepstakes. Today might be the last day, but they have a summer sweepstakes going on. You can win free stuff, and that's at clubluckytiger.com. Go hit them up, enter. You don't even have to be a guy. You can be a girl too. So that's great, and thanks for their sponsorship. I want to say, remember to everybody that every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. Now, I want to thank everyone who wrote in letters. What a great day today with letters. I'm all energized. I got the dogs groomed. It's all fantastic for their summer. They don't have to be dying of the heat in LA because it gets really hot here. That's why you groom dogs in the summer. So keep their hair so short because it all grows back. And by the time it gets to be winter, you know, get a little trim. But yeah, so thank you for being here. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll be back on the John Campea show I'll probably be here at noon tomorrow. I'll try and be here at noon tomorrow. I'll be on the John Campea show on Monday at 9 a.m. I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you all for participating. I want to thank my moderators, Greg, Jim, actually Detective Jim, Greg, Terry, and the Honorable Mike Bodden for being here. And thank you all for participating and making this place one of the most inclusive and fun and enjoyable places to come on the interwebs. Please, if you like these chats, please like them. Hit that little like button and subscribe. It's funny that most of the people, well, not most, the subscribers and non-subscribers, there's more non-subscribers to my channel than subscribers. I got to get those subscribers because, you know, what am I at, like 11,800? When I get to 50,000, I have a big plan that you will all be able to participate in, something that has never been done before on the internet. And it's an ongoing thing, and it's going to be, it's a revolutionary idea. But anyway, I want to thank you all for being here, and I'm going to bring this chat, Robservations number 147, to a close. So enjoy your Saturday afternoons and have a better day.